Chapter 785. The Khanate sword embryo was a natural ability that was born in Yiguchen's dantian. But now, it was being controlled by Gu Xiaoyang to kill the original owner. The Khanate sword embryo that could cut through everything was filled with chaotic energy as it streaked across the sky. It was like the most dazzling rainbow in the world. No one would be able to block this sword. That little bastard is finally going to die. Zhenggu shook his head and sneered. The two sovereigns of the Heavenly Star dynasty were the same. The enemies of Yiguchen and those who had a grudge against him were all watching. The Vermilion Bird Jade, Yu Wentian, Yu Wenji, Gongming Ba, and the others were all watching. They knew that the sword sect's Yiguchen, who had once swept through them and became their nightmare, would finally fall at this moment. But at the same time, the people of the sword sect Tower Forest, Yiguchen's friends, LV Qinghan, Bai Yanji, Chen Yi, and the others were all watching with sorrow in their eyes. They couldn't do anything in this situation. Yiguchen, is it going to end like this? Princess Fengshi's charming face was a little complicated and sad. She and Yiguchen were friends and enemies, but now, she really didn't want to see Yiguchen fall. Brother Yi, your glory hasn't bloomed yet. Is it going to end like this? Kenpo also clenched his fists and sighed in his heart. Yiguchen. Yan Wushuang let out a heart-wrenching cry as tears blurred her eyes. Scenes of the past appeared before her eyes. Was today going to be their farewell? Situ Hongshua's body trembled slightly. She had the urge to dash out, but the 7 despair demon heart in her body stopped her. Grandma Withered Flower stood in front of Situ Hongshua and said, although you didn't kill him with your own hands, Yiguchen's fall means that you have nothing to worry about. Situ Hongshua was silent. She clearly hated Yiguchen because Yiguchen was also one of the murderers who had annihilated the Situ family. Yiguchen had even killed her brother in front of her. But why, at the moment when Yiguchen was about to fall? In Situ Hongshua's heart, there was a heart-wrenching pain. At this moment, the millions of people from the various empires, from exalts to ordinary cultivators, were all watching the final scene. Would the sword sect Yiguchen, who went against fate, be defeated by young Master Nebula, Gu Xiaoyang? Silly boy. Su Jianshi couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to dash out, but little Fatty pulled her back. This is Brother Ye's own karma. You must believe in him. It was rare for little Fatty to not have a mischievous smile on his face. Instead, his fat face was extremely solemn. But, Su Jianshi felt a heart-wrenching pain. Under the witness of millions of people, you died in the hands of your own innate ability. Yiguchen, your life is complete. Gu Xiaoyang stood with his hands behind his back. He was like the ruler of the stars who ruled over life and death as he looked down at Yiguchen, who was about to be killed by the Khanate sword embryo. Ha ha ha. Yiguchen's black hair fluttered in the wind. His clothes were stained with blood, but he had a lofty and unyielding character. I am the sword sect, but I am also the sword demon. Even the vast expanse of heaven cannot hide my eyes. The vast earth cannot bury my heart. The gods and Buddhas cannot end my life. Gu Xiaoyang, you dare to say that you can end my life? Wishful thinking. Yiguchen roared at the sky. His aura surged and his anger burned the 9 heavens. All the true qi in his body exploded. Primal chaos soul power exploded. Ancient god power exploded. A terrifying aura surged out of Yiguchen's body and gathered in between his eyebrows. There seemed to be a crack in between his eyebrows, but it was difficult to open. Ancient God's heart, explode. Yiguchen's eyes were as red as blood as he activated the power of the Ancient God's heart again. Even though the Ancient God's heart had been sealed, the Ancient God power still surged out and gathered in between Yiguchen's eyebrows. At this moment, the Khanate sword embryo was only a meter away from Yiguchen. In the next moment, Yiguchen would die. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him, and their eyes were bloodshot. They were about to witness the fall of Yiguchen from the sword sect. However, Eye of the Void Vault, open. All the power in Yiguchen's body exploded at the same time. His aura reached an unprecedented peak. This was a rebellion against the unfairness of fate. This was an unyielding roar against death. This was the determination to go against fate and fight throughout the 9 heavens and 10 earths to eliminate all injustice. The crack in between Yiguchen's eyebrows slowly opened. An almost transparent eye that had merged with the void appeared. In an instant, everything seemed to have frozen. The area around Yiguchen, space, and time seemed to have stopped. Gu Xiaoyang, who was not far away from him, was also frozen like a mosquito in amber. He could think and sense everything. However, he could not move or move. The Khanate sword embryo that seemed to have the power to destroy everything also stopped in front of Yiguchen. The Khanate sword embryo that was frozen in the void was beautiful like a shuttle-shaped jade. Even the wisps of chaotic aura that were emitted were frozen like strands of hair. Keep. Yiguchen's vital energy surged and swallowed the Khanate sword embryo into his body. At the same time, he used the Azura sword principle to activate the life fall. Azura tribulation, life fall. The blood-red sword chi swept towards the motionless Gu Xiaoyang with an aura of annihilation. All of this seemed to take a long time. However, it all happened in just 1/10 of a breath's time. In this short time, Yiguchen swallowed the Khanate sword embryo and suppressed it in his dantian. At the same time, he used the Azura tribulation, life fall. Gu Xiaoyang's godlike calm eyes revealed fear for the first time as he looked at the blood-red sword light that was heading towards his head. That's right. It was the fear of facing death. Who was Gu Xiaoyang? He was one of the 7 great bears of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. After obtaining Yiguchen's Khanate sword embryo, he became even more popular. His strength was extraordinary, and he ranked 9th on the Dragon Phoenix list. He was one of the 10 great childs. Gu Xiaoyang, who had a smooth journey and had never experienced a life or death crisis. At this moment, he completely experienced the feeling of facing death. No, the sword energy was about to pierce through Gu Xiaoyang's head. However, at this moment, Yiguchen's body suddenly shook. The ancient god power in his body was almost completely drained. Not a single drop was left. At the same time, the vigorous chaotic soul power in his chaotic consciousness was almost completely drained in 1/10 of a breath's time. What did this mean? It should be known that Yiguchen's chaotic consciousness was far superior to other warriors of the same level. The consciousness of ordinary life and death portals was a stream, but Yiguchen's was a vast ocean. However, the ocean-like chaotic soul power was almost completely drained in such a short time. This was extremely terrifying. Puchi. Yiguchen lost almost all of his strength in an instant. His consciousness was about to collapse. He even spat out a mouthful of blood and left his ancient god form. At this moment, the stagnant space also recovered as if it had melted. Gu Xiaoyang's figure flashed. Puchi. The life fall sword still pierced through Gu Xiaoyang's chest. Gu Xiaoyang instantly opened his stellar eyes, and stellar mystic power flowed out to protect his heart and other vital parts. Even so, Gu Xiaoyang's figure was still sent flying. The sword energy penetrated his body. Apart from his heart, his ribs and other organs were all broken and damaged. Gu Xiaoyang spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with broken organs. Everyone was dumbfounded at this moment. An unprecedented extreme shock appeared on everyone's faces. Chapter 786. There were over 1 million cultivators gathered around the arena. But strangely, not a single sound could be heard. Everyone's faces were raised in a daze. Their faces were frozen with shock as they looked at the unexpected battle in the sky. Many people's minds were still blank. What did they just see? Gu Xiaoyang, who had crushed Yiguchen like a cat toying with a mouse, was seriously injured and sent flying. This scene was simply inconceivable. Many cultivators couldn't help rubbing their eyes, thinking that they were too nervous and were seeing things. What a joke! Gu Xiaoyang, one of the 10 great young masters and a peerless heaven pride of the divine dwelling stage, had activated the Khanate sword embryo. Not only did he fail to kill Yiguchen, but his Khanate sword embryo was taken away and he was seriously injured. This is impossible. Zhenggu was dumbfounded. Even with his composure, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. How is this possible? My eyes must be playing tricks on me. Starry Sword Pavilion, Dongfang Family, Tianqing Empire. Whether it was Dongfang Shuri, Dongfang Ziyun, or the heaven prides of the other empires, such as Zhuke Yuantian, etc. Their mouths were wide open, almost able to swallow a fist. What the hell? Everyone's face was filled with shock, and they couldn't calm down. Yiguchen survived. Yan Wushuang was also in a daze, and there were still traces of tears at the corners of her eyes. Just a moment ago, she was heartbroken and in incomparable pain, afraid of Yiguchen's death. But the scene now made her feel a little unreal. Chu Huang, is what I saw real? Princess Fengxi covered her red lips, and she was in a daze. Your Highness, Chu Huang also thinks that she saw wrong. Chu Huang seemed to be in a daze, and her red lips were wide open. Brother Yi, you're really... Kenpo was completely speechless. He knew that he had already raised Yiguchen's talent and strength to the limit. However, Yiguchen was able to once again shatter his understanding and break his limits. Su Jianshir's beautiful eyes were like pear blossoms in the rain. However, after crying for a while, she burst into laughter. Silly brat. You really made me worry. She was proud of Yiguchen. This was the peerless man that she admired and admired. Situ Hongxue stood in the void with a dazed expression, unable to describe what she was feeling. It was very complicated, with mixed feelings. Grandma Withered Flower also revealed a rare look of surprise. What kind of divine ability does that brat have? Grandma Withered Flower was extremely astonished, but when she saw Situ Hongshua's fluctuating emotions and her worried expression, her old face became gloomy again. Could it be that we really have to use that method? A sinister glint flashed across Grandma Withered Flower's eyes. After an unknown number of breaths, the deafening cries of shock and astonishment rang out one after another. The clamor exploded between the heavens and earth. What did I just see? Yiguchen heavily injured Gu Xiaoyang, who is at the life and death threshold. Heavens! Yiguchen heavily injured one of the 10 great young masters with the cultivation of the great profound threshold. Is he really going to defy the heavens today? Shocking, too shocking. If Yiguchen doesn't die today, his name will probably shake the entire South Horizon region. Crossing 2 major realms to heavily injure Gu Xiaoyang. What kind of divine ability is that? It can even freeze the void. It's too terrifying. Countless voices rang out, shaking the heavens and earth. Because this scene had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. In the sky, Gu Xiaoyang's body trembled as a huge hole appeared on his chest. He had used the Azura sword Dao to execute the life fall. Gu Xiaoyang didn't have any means to counterattack or defend himself. If it weren't for Yiguchen's strength that couldn't withstand it, he would most likely have died today. But even if he escaped death, Gu Xiaoyang had suffered an unprecedented injury. This was equivalent to him standing there without any protection and taking Yiguchen's killing move. Even a divine dwelling expert couldn't withstand it. Cough, cough, cough. Gu Xiaoyang constantly coughed up blood mixed with crushed internal organs. At the same time, he swallowed a saint pill to repair his body with the power of his star eyes. How is this possible? How is this possible? What kind of technique is that? How can he affect time and space with the cultivation of the great profound threshold? Gu Xiaoyang's face was extremely cold. He was so angry that his heart was about to explode. How is this possible? How is this possible? He had come with an invincible aura to forcefully erase Yiguchen in front of everyone, including Yi Cangyue. But in the end, this was the outcome. He shifted his gaze to Yi Cangyue. At this moment, Yi Cangyu, who was usually called the Fairy of Guanghan, revealed slight surprise and astonishment on her beautiful face that was elegant like frost. What kind of technique is that? Although Yi Sangyue was a peerless genius of the Misty Sword Pavilion, Yiguchen's technique still shocked her. Even if she was caught off guard, it would be very dangerous for her to face Yiguchen's technique. This person is interesting. Yi Sangyue's bright eyes turned to the other young man. Gu Xiaoyang's face was trembling with anger. At this moment, the person who was the focus of attention wasn't Gu Xiaoyang. It was Yiguchen. However, Yiguchen's condition was also very poor. Although he was barely standing in the void, he was soaked with blood. The ancient god power in his body had dried up, and there wasn't much true qi left. His chaotic sea of consciousness was even more terrifying. 99% of it had been consumed and was almost dried up. Yiguchen's sea of consciousness would have completely collapsed if he had held on for even 1/10,000th of a second. The eye of the hidden void was too powerful. It involved time, space, and so on. However, the price of using it was too high. It was like sacrificing 800 to kill one's enemy. It couldn't be used as an ordinary technique. Unless he was really going to die, Yiguchen's sea of consciousness would collapse if he used it a few more times. Moreover, the eye of the hidden void would even backfire when facing an enemy stronger than him. Its power was many times weaker than when Heavenly Pupil King used it. It could only freeze a small area of space-time. If Heavenly Eye King were to use it here, the millions of martial artists on this land would be frozen in place. Yiguchen could only freeze the innate sword embryo and Gu Xiaoyang in front of him. Pfft! Yiguchen spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was extremely pale. Impossible. You can't take the innate sword embryo away. Although Gu Xiaoyang was also severely injured, he was still a divine dwelling realm expert. He formed a seal with one hand and a surge of star force spread out. Countless star force patterns appeared on the surface of the innate sword embryo that was suppressed in Yiguchen's dantian. Buzz! Buzz! The innate sword embryo was controlled by the star force and was about to break out of his body. Cough! Yiguchen spat out another mouthful of blood after being backfired by the sword qi. Suppress it. Yiguchen's lips were stained with blood, but he looked determined. He had to get the innate sword embryo back. Chapter 787. The innate sword embryo came from the same source as Yiguchen and was connected by blood. However, it was taken away by Gu Xiaoyang. Gu Xiaoyang had left a star imprint on it so that he could control it freely. However, he couldn't refine it completely. This was also why Yi Sangyue didn't agree to dual cultivate with him immediately to merge with the innate indestructible sword embryo. If something stolen couldn't be refined perfectly, it would always be flawed. The innate sword embryo belongs to me. How can you take it back? Yiguchen tried his best to suppress the innate sword embryo in his dantian. The heart demon flame and purple void thunder both hit the innate sword embryo, trying to erase the star imprint. It's useless. Yiguchen is mine. He'll always be mine. Gu Xiaoyang coughed up blood and made a hand seal. He was put in such a difficult position by Yiguchen's void burial eye. If Yiguchen took back the innate sword embryo, Gu Xiaoyang would go mad with anger. Come back. Gu Xiaoyang activated the hand seal again. The innate sword embryo trembled even more violently and was about to break out of Yiguchen's dantian. Even the exotic fire and exotic thunder couldn't erase the star imprint on the innate sword embryo. Give up, Yiguchen. I asked the false saint elder in the sect to set up the star imprint. How can you erase it? Gu Xiaoyang showed a hint of coldness. After he took back the innate sword embryo, he would use it to kill Yiguchen. Cough cough, Yiguchen's body trembled and he coughed up blood again. However, he still suppressed the innate sword embryo. At this most critical juncture, the Thunder Calamity Sword, which had been silent in the depths of Yiguchen's dantian, suddenly trembled slightly. Strands of lightning spread out from the body of the black sword. Thunder Calamity Sword. Yiguchen's heart suddenly trembled. The Thunder Calamity Sword was his biggest secret and trump card. Unfortunately, Yiguchin couldn't activate the Thunder Calamity Sword on his own. It had to react on its own. The lightning struck the innate sword embryo. After a few rounds of scouring, the star patterns on the sword embryo were all washed away. In that instant, Yiguchin felt as if they shared the same bloodline. The innate sword embryo was like a part of him. The innate sword embryo also seemed to have a mind of its own. It buzzed and trembled, spinning back and forth in Yiguchin's dantian, as if it was very happy to return to Yiguchin's embrace. What's going on? At the same time, Gu Xiaoyang sensed it. His connection with the innate sword embryo had been completely severed. In other words, the star patterns on the innate sword embryo had been completely obliterated. Impossible! Gu Xiaoyang suddenly screamed. His eyes turned red as he stared at Yiguchin. How could Yiguchin erase the brand left behind by a false sage expert? I've said it before. It's mine. It will always be mine. Yiguchin was extremely weak at the moment, but his tone was still firm and cold. No. How could it be? Gu Xiaoyang's face turned pale. He was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood. He was an ant in his eyes. He used to be someone he could crush to death at will. But now, he was seriously injured and even his innate sword embryo was taken away. It was a great humiliation. The innate sword embryo was taken back by Yiguchin. Everyone present was also shocked. Who would have thought that Gu Xiaoyang, who was like a god, would end up like this? He was seriously injured by Yiguchin, who was 2 realms lower than him, and even his innate sword embryo was taken back. Gu Chen. The blue veins on Gu Xiaoyang's temples throbbed. He was so angry that he wanted to burn his internal organs. Yiguchin's face was pale, and his breath was weak. After risking his life to use the Eye of Void, his breath fell to the bottom. The innate sword embryo was quietly lying in his dantian. It was his to begin with, so there was no need to refine it. The innate sword embryo automatically became one with Yiguchin. Yiguchin's dantian was also completely perfect. There were no flaws. In the future, his cultivation and breakthroughs would be much faster. Silly boy. Su Jianshi, Little Fatty, Divine Eagle, and Blackie flashed to Yiguchin's side. Su Jianshi hugged the weak Yiguchin in her arms. She stroked Yiguchin's bloodied face. She bit her cherry lips, feeling pity and heartache. I'm fine. Yiguchin forced a faint smile. Yiguchin, do you think you can survive today? The innate sword embryo will eventually fall into my hands. Gu Xiaoyang smiled coldly, but he didn't act rashly. Because Su Jianshi gave him a sense of danger. The scene fell into a strange silence. At this moment, Grandma Withered Flower said coldly, "This is a good opportunity. Take advantage of the fact that Yiguchin is heavily injured and defenseless to kill him." This. Situ Hongxue clenched her fists. Looking at Yiguchin in Su Jianshi's arms, Situ Hongxue felt a heart-wrenching pain. It was as if thousands of needles had pierced her heart. Why was it like this? She should be the one standing beside Yiguchin. Why was fate playing tricks on people? Still not going to make a move. Seeing Situ Hongxue's change of expression, Grandma Withered Flower's face sank. If Situ Hongxue killed Yiguchin, the 7 Despair Demon Heart would be more effective. But if she was still struggling and unwilling to make a move, then, in the next moment, Grandma Withered Flower's eyes darkened. With a flip of her hand, a jade talisman engraved with profound runes appeared in her palm. Then, she suddenly patted Situ Hongxue's back. In an instant, Situ Hongxue's delicate body shook. The luster in her eyes that were originally flickering with a bright luster dimmed a little, and her pupils became extremely deep and serene. The 7 Despair Demon Heart in her delicate body also burst forth with even more dark, cold, and merciless negative energy. "Why, not me?" Situ Hongxue muttered with an indifferent expression. Go and kill Yiguchin." A sinister smile appeared on Grandma Withered Flower's face. Situ Hongshua's delicate figure instantly flashed out. Haha, this heartless talisman can not only suppress a person's emotions, but it can also draw out the energy of the 7 despair demon heart. I'm helping you, said Grandma Withered Flower with a smile. Yiguchen's body was weak and he was in Su Jianchu's embrace. However, the situation was still very dangerous. But right at this moment, Yiguchen suddenly felt a wisp of killing intent. It wasn't coming from Gu Xiaoyang, but a figure in snow-white clothes wielding a long sword like a fairy. But what she brought was killing intent. Die! His emotionless eyes stared at Su Jianchu and Yiguchen's backs. She thrust her sword at Su Jianchu. Su Jianchu, get out of the way. Yiguchen's expression changed as he pushed Su Jianchu away. The sword trembled and tilted slightly, but, poochie, a dull sound could be heard. It was the sound of the sword piercing through flesh. At this moment, the world was deathly silent. Chapter 788. Bright red blood slowly dripped down along the edge of the sword. Dressed in a snow-white robe, it was a beautiful fairy. She held a long sword in her hand and pierced Yiguchen's chest. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone's expression turned sluggish, completely stiff. Who could tell them what had happened? This peerless woman had pierced Yiguchen's heart with her sword. Even Gu Xiaoyang was stunned. He did not expect such a thing to happen. It's a success. Ha, the 7 despair demon heart has finally been perfected. I will also receive the Valley Master's praise and reward. Grandma Withered Flower's face was filled with joy. She had used the heartless talisman to control Situ Hongxue for her own selfish desires. She did not feel that she was despicable at all. Instead, she was happy with the result. Situ Hongxue, when you truly master your divine technique, you will know that love and love are all empty. Only power is everything. Grandma Withered Flower sneered. Su Jianchu was stunned. Her mind went blank. Yan Wushuang's face froze and turned pale. Shua, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the disciples of the sword sect almost stopped breathing. Yiguchen was not killed by those sovereigns. He was not killed by Gu Xiaoyang. In the end, he was pierced through the heart by a snow-white robed woman. It had been a long time since the destruction of the Situ family. Therefore, even the people of the Saint Origin dynasty did not know that this snow-white robed woman was Situ Hongxue of the Situ family in the Saint Origin dynasty. Cough, blood continued to gush out of Yiguchen's mouth. His hand that was holding the sword had cut open his palm. Blood was also oozing out. Situ Hongxue stood facing him. It was as if all sound had disappeared. The space was silent. The bloody sword pierced through Yiguchen's body and came out from his back. Situ Hongshue's hand that was holding the sword was trembling. The scenes of the past were like a dream. On the sword testing stone, a sword mark began their fate. At the foot of the Sky Sword Peak, in the great desolate forest, they practiced the sword together, and their hearts were moved. The Situ clan was annihilated, and Hong Xuechu bid farewell. When they met once more on Tianhuang Plains, love turned to hate, love turned to hate. That sword was unable to land. All that was left was a sigh. If the heavens had feelings, the heavens would also grow old. Now, the sword had finally landed. Their fate was always shallow, but their affection was deep. You still can't do it, Yiguchen kept coughing up blood, but there was a smile on his face. In the end, the tip of Situ Hongshue's sword still deviated a little. It was only an inch away from his heart. This inch of distance was Situ Hongshue's last wish for Yiguchen. Situ Hongshue's eyes trembled violently, as if she was struggling. It's fine, I don't blame you. Yiguchen's face was pale from the loss of blood, but he was still smiling. This is the price I should pay for you. I've wronged you. Yiguchen didn't retreat. Instead, the sword stabbed deeply into his body. Yiguchen. Situ Hongxue struggled violently, shaking her head. Her face remained indifferent, and her eyes were lifeless. 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. "This is for you." Yiguchin stuffed something into Situ Hongshua's other hand. Then, Yiguchin's figure suddenly retreated. Blood splattered everywhere. "Silly boy." Su Jianshi let out a shrill scream. Only now did her blank mind react. Her voice was as mournful as a cuckoo's cry of blood. "Ha, how interesting." Gu Xiaoyang laughed. This scene was beyond his expectations. Su Jianshi took the injured Yiguchin. Fortunately, the sword hadn't pierced through his heart. With Yiguchin's powerful physical body, he was only heavily injured. It wasn't fatal. "He's not dead yet." "What a lucky boy." Grandma Withered Flower's face was gloomy. At the last moment, Situ Hongxue had forced the sword to deviate by an inch. Otherwise, Yiguchin would have died from the sword piercing through his heart. "I'm fine." Yiguchin used his remaining physical strength to stop the bleeding. "Damn it, how dare he hurt you like this?" Su Jianshi's eyes were red. Her hair was disheveled, and her fine black hair danced wildly in the wind. Her cold eyes were filled with boundless fury as she looked at Situ Hongxue. "Die." Su Jianshi couldn't take it anymore. She used the power of the human emperor's sword again, and an ancient golden sword spread out from her body. "Not good, that's the human emperor's sword." Zhenggu and the other sovereigns retreated in fear. This was because Su Jianshi had used the human emperor's sword to injure Li Sun. He wasn't as strong as Li Sun, so he might be killed by the human emperor's sword. "Retreat." Gu Xiaoyang coldly glanced at Yiguchin. But Su Jianshi's aura was too powerful. Gu Xiaoyang was heavily injured, so he couldn't make a move right now. "Su Jianshi, don't." Yiguchin's expression changed as he yelled. But Su Jianshi couldn't listen to anything he said. The moment Yiguchin was pierced by the sword, Su Jianshi felt a pain worse than dying 1,000,000 times. She was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. Therefore, Situ Hongshue's sword had touched Su Jianshi's reverse scale. Su Jianshi's reverse scale was Yiguchin. "Die." Rays of golden sword light shot out from the human emperor's sword. Even though Su Jianshi's strength was only at the life and death realm, she wasn't afraid of Situ Hongxue, who was at the divine dwelling realm. Situ Hongshue's expression remained indifferent. Her limpid eyes were lifeless and empty. Only the tears in the corners of her eyes kept falling. She also glanced at Yiguchin from the corner of her eyes. Situ Hongxue understood the feeling of a knife twisting in her heart. Boom! The golden sword light carried Su Jianshi's anger as it slashed towards Situ Hongxue. At the same time, the 7 extinction demon heart in Situ Hongshue's body throbbed. An incomparably dark, cold, and ruthless domain spread out and imprisoned the golden light. Situ Hongxue formed another seal and blasted it out. It was as if an immortal had appeared and swept across the void. It was the human immortal seal. "That's the Immortal Valley's martial arts. She's from the Supreme Immortal Valley." Zhenggu and the other sovereigns were shocked when they saw the human immortal seal. They hadn't noticed it before. "She's from the Immortal Valley." Gu Xiaoyang was also surprised. The Immortal Valley was one of the 3 great hidden forces that didn't care about worldly affairs. But now, she was here and attacking Yiguchin. "Yiguchin, you brought this upon yourself. How dare you provoke someone from the Immortal Valley?" Gu Xiaoyang sneered. He thought that Situ Hongxue and Yiguchin were enemies. In fact, that was indeed the case. The 2 women fought in the sky. One was dressed in green and had a fierce look on her face. The human emperor's sword was floating in her body. Although she hadn't fully summoned it, it was still extremely powerful. The other was dressed in white and had a peerless appearance. But she was cold and indifferent. Her eyes were empty and tears fell from the corners of her eyes. "You, cough, stop!" Yiguchin shouted as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. It didn't matter if he fought to the death, but he didn't want to see the 2 women fight to the death because of him. "Silly boy, this woman harmed you so much. She must die. Su Jianchu's body shone with a golden light. Her hair seemed to be plated with a layer of gold, and her eyes were also slightly golden. Situ Hongxue was silent, but the struggle in her eyes became more intense. Situ Hongshue's condition isn't right. Yi Guchen realized that Situ Hongshue's eyes were empty and tears kept falling from the corners of her eyes. There was a hint of sadness and despair. Yi Guchen turned his gaze and suddenly saw a stooped old woman. It's her. Yi Guchen had seen Grandma Withered Flower once in the Tianhuang Plains. At this moment, Grandma Withered Flower was forming hand seals as if she was activating something. Could it be? Damn it, you demonic woman. Yi Guchen was furious and his eyes seemed to be burning with flames. At that moment, how could he not understand what sort of trick Granny Withered Flower had used on Situ Hongxue? You deserve to die. Yi Guchen was furious and his voice was like thunder. Chapter 789. If Situ Hongxue attacked Yi Guchen out of her own will, then Yi Guchen wouldn't hesitate. Yi Guchen had no regrets. He was willing to do it. This was what he owed Situ Hongxue. But if Situ Hongxue was being controlled by someone, then the meaning was different. Hearing Yi Guchen's words, Grandma Withered Flower's face turned cold. Dying under Hongchen Shue's sword is your destiny. If you keep talking, then I'm afraid I'll kill you myself, Grandma Withered Flower said coldly. Although she was just a servant, she was still someone from the Immortal Valley and a sovereign of the Heavenly Palace. She was already filled with murderous intent after being scolded by Yi Guchen. You demonic granny, you'll definitely die today. Yi Guchen's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Grandma Withered Flower. His killing intent was even stronger than Zhenggu and the others. Grandma Withered Flower had already touched his bottom line. This person had to die. You vile spawn, how dare you offend me? I originally wanted Hongchen Shui to kill you personally, but it looks like I'll have to do it myself. Grandma Withered Flower was also furious. As a sovereign from the Immortal Valley, she was actually told that she had to die by a junior in the life and death realm. If Yi Guchen didn't die, then where would Grandma Withered Flower's face go? Die for me. Grandma Withered Flower couldn't hold back her anger and was about to attack Yi Guchen. But right at this moment, Situ Hongxue, who was fighting with Su Jianchu, suddenly retreated and struggled violently. Then, she held the sword with her trembling jade-like hands and pressed it against her snow-white neck. If you touch him, I'll die. Situ Hongshue's empty eyes were filled with tears as she struggled to say a few words. She wasn't only fighting with the 7 extinction demon heart, but she was also resisting the power of the heartless talisman. Even Su Jianchu, who was burning with rage, was at a loss because of the situation before her and temporarily stopped. What is going on? The surrounding millions of martial artists were all stunned by this scene. The snow-robed woman who had just pierced Yi Guchen's body with her sword was now threatening to let Yi Guchen live. Gu Xiaoyang's face froze. He originally thought that Situ Hongxue and Yi Guchen were mortal enemies, but it seemed that there was more to it than met the eye. Hongchen Shui, you. Granny Withered Flower froze and turned to look at Situ Hongxue. Her face was red with anger. She did not expect Situ Hongxue to have such willpower to resist the power of the heartless talisman. Touch him. I'll die. Situ Hongxue flipped her hand and placed the tip of the sword on her neck. The sharp tip of the sword stuck to her delicate snow-white skin, leaving a trace of blood. As long as the tip of the sword was an inch closer, it would have slit Situ Hongshue's throat. Damn it! Granny Withered Flower was enraged and her face twitched. If Situ Hongxue died outside, then Granny Withered Flower wouldn't be able to live either. The master of the Immortal Valley had high hopes for Situ Hongxue. Situ Hongxue was very useful to her, so she couldn't let anything happen to Situ Hongxue. Hongxue. Yi Guchen's gaze became complicated. Situ Hongxue was being controlled by Granny Withered Flower, but she still had the willpower to threaten with her life. This was a friendship that was deeply engraved in their bones. Even if Yiguchen had tried to kill the Situ family, even if he had never said a word of regret to Situ Hongxue, this woman still thought of him at the most critical moment and did not hesitate to use her life to threaten him. Su Jianshi might have done a lot for Yiguchen. But who could say that Situ Hongxue had not done anything? Hong Chenxue, stop! Granny Withered Flower glared hatefully at Yiguchen before her figure flashed and she appeared beside Situ Hongxue. She snatched the sword from her hand. Situ Hongshue's empty eyes regained some luster. She gazed at Yiguchen. Her beautiful face was filled with longing and sadness. In the end, Situ Hongxue could not bring herself to do it. Her jade-like lips parted slightly as she silently said something to Yiguchen. Yiguchen's lips were mumbling as he read the words out loud. Once you've seen the ocean, you can't be water. Apart from Mount Wu, you can't be clouds. Because I've seen you, other men can no longer enter my heart. Hong Shui, you. Yiguchen opened his mouth and wanted to ask Situ Hongxue to follow him. But when he thought of his current situation, wouldn't pulling Situ Hongxue to his side also put Situ Hongxue in danger? The two of them looked at each other across the void. Situ Hongxue suddenly smiled faintly at Yiguchen. Ever since the Situ family was destroyed, Situ Hongxue had never smiled again. After entering the Zenith Immortal Valley and cultivating the Zenith Emotionless Tao, Situ Hongxue had cast away all emotions. On her beautiful face, there was always only a layer of cold indifference. But now, Situ Hongxue was smiling. Her smile was like the clouds and the first moon. It was extremely beautiful and moved one's heart. She hoped that in Yiguchen's heart, she wasn't that woman who cried and was filled with hatred. But she was smiling. Hong Shui. The smile of a beauty could topple a city. Even people like Yiguchen, who didn't know how to flirt, stared at her. Situ Hongshue's smile was very beautiful. However, this beautiful scene was instantly destroyed by Grandma Withered Flower. Hong Chenxue, sleep for a while. Grandma Withered Flower struck the back of Situ Hongshue's neck. Situ Hongxue immediately fainted. After placing Situ Hongxue properly, Grandma Withered Flower's eyes were extremely cold. Since Hong Chenxue can't do it, let me kill you. You evil creature, don't even think about having anything to do with Hong Chenxue. She is the Immortal Valley's prodigy and the disciple of the Immortal Valley's master. You are not worthy. Grandma Withered Flower's aura rose, and the aura of a supremacy spread out, bringing with it a cold killing intent. She decided to act first and report later. After killing Yiguchen, she would bring Situ Hongxue back to the Immortal Valley. At that time, the Immortal Valley's master would have a way to prevent Situ Hongxue from seeking death. So what if you are from the Immortal Valley? I don't know what you have done to Hong Chenxue, but if anything happens to her, I will definitely destroy the Immortal Valley. Yiguchen's words were sonorous, and the killing intent in them was not any weaker than Grandma Withered Flower's. When he said this, the entire place fell silent. Even the people from Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Sky Star Dynasty, and Dongfang family were stunned. Destroy the Immortal Valley? What kind of joke was this? There were 3 hidden forces in the South Sky region, 1 mountain, 1 ocean, and 1 immortal valley. Although the Supreme Immortal Valley did not appear, it had been around for longer than the Overlord forces. On the surface, the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion and the other Overlord forces were not much weaker than the 3 hidden forces. However, the 1 mountain, 1 ocean, and 1 immortal valley had never shown their full strength. They had always been in hiding and did not participate in the disputes of the South Sky region. No one knew how many peerless experts there were in the 3 hidden forces. No one knew how deep their heritage and foundation was. Destroying a reclusive force was even more ridiculous than destroying an overlord force. Stupid. Gu Xiaoyang shook his head coldly. Even the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion was wary of the hidden forces like the Immortal Valley. Amir Yiguchen had the guts to say that he would destroy the Immortal Valley. What a joke. This is the best joke I have ever heard in my life. You evil creature, you think you can destroy the Immortal Valley? What a joke! When Grandma Withered Flower heard this, she let out a sharp, crow-like laugh. This was the best joke she had ever heard. She was not the only one. The surrounding people also shook their heads and laughed. The ignorant were fearless. This seemed to be the best description of Yiguchin. Old demonic woman, you can still laugh. Today, I have said that you will die. Yiguchin's eyes were sharp. Grandma Withered Flower's attack on Situ Hongshiwe had completely infuriated Yiguchin. How dare you speak to a sovereign like this? Die! Grandma Withered Flower was so angry that she laughed. She no longer spoke and was about to attack. At this moment, everyone's attention was on Yiguchin. With Grandma Withered Flower, an immortal valley sovereign, attacking, Yiguchin probably had no chance of surviving. Su Jianshi stood beside Yiguchin. She did not ask anything about Situ Hongshiwe. She only stood shoulder to shoulder with Yiguchin. Yiguchin's face was cold. He was about to undo Blackie's seal. However, at this moment, an extremely indifferent voice sounded from the distant sky. Immortal Valley Sovereign, please stay your hand. Let me deal with them. Hearing this voice, Su Jianshi, who stood beside Yiguchin, trembled violently. An intense hatred that seemed to originate from his soul erupted like a volcano. Her eyes were as red as blood as she stared at the distant sky. D. How? Tian. Chapter 790. In the distant sky, a golden dragon ship crossed the void and came over. Wherever it passed, the golden light shone. Petals fell from the void, and golden lotuses were born in the space. Vaguely, there seemed to be the chanting of a true dragon. Flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses bloomed from the ground, and the true dragon sang in Sanskrit. 4 people stood at the bow of the dragon boat. 3 of them were exuding the powerful pressure of a celestial palace venerable. However, to the crowd's astonishment, those 3 exalted level experts were actually standing respectfully behind that figure like servants. It was hard to imagine. One had to know that even someone like Gu Xiaoyang would never order a venerable like Xinggu around like a servant, even though they were on the same level. However, at this moment, they saw the 3 venerables bowing slightly with respectful expressions. It was a very young man. His long golden hair seemed to be flowing with the brilliance of the sun. His silver eyes were like the cold moon that indifferently reflected the world. He wore a loose white robe that slightly exposed his chest, which glowed like jade. His face was also very handsome and flawless. However, the most unforgettable thing about him was not his flawless face. It was his perfect temperament. It was the temperament of a banished immortal that could not be more or less. It was as if he was a perfect work of art carved by the most skillful hands of the heavens. He seemed to be in harmony with the heavenly path, so harmonious and perfect that no flaws could be found. This kind of temperament could only be reflected in one kind of person. That was a 10th grade supreme genius, a natural-born god. The millions of warriors present looked at the golden dragon boat coming from the void. Among them, there were many female warriors who seemed to be deeply attracted to the man with golden hair and silver eyes. His temperament was too perfect. It made these women feel a sense of heat on their bodies, and they could not wait to pounce on him. It was human nature to yearn for perfection, and the man with golden hair and silver eyes was such an existence. He is. Yiguchin's eyes were slightly shocked. Among all the men he had seen, the most outstanding one in terms of appearance was Jun Xiaoyao. It was a feeling that made him look as handsome as an immortal. While the golden-haired, silver-eyed man paled in comparison to Jun Xiaoyao in terms of looks alone, the perfect bearing he exuded was something that Jun Xiaoyao lacked. D. How? Tian. Su Jianshi clenched her teeth as her body trembled. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with extreme hatred. Yiguchin had never seen such a pained and hateful expression on this elegant and natural girl's face. Su Jianshi. Yiguchin patted her shoulder to comfort her. He looked at Di Haotian indifferently. Was this the enemy that Su Moyan had spoken of, so strong that it made one despair? It's Di Haotian. Heavens, is it really Di Haotian from the Heavenly God Sword sect? Why is he here? That's Di Haotian we're talking about, the Heavenly True Dragon. He's rumored to be a level 10 Heaven's Chosen Supreme, a born divine being. A 10th grade Supreme Genius. I'm going crazy. In our dynasty, there are only a few 7th grade Supreme Geniuses. Is there really a 10th grade Supreme Genius in this world? Crazy. The millions of martial artists present went crazy as they exclaimed. Di Haotian's reputation was simply too great. The Supreme Emperor's son of the Heavenly God Sword sect, the true dragon Hao Tian, a 10th grade Supreme Genius, one of the 10 nobles, and the echelon of the Heavenly God Sword sect. Each of these titles could scare a group of people to death. Each of these titles could be the absolute core of a supreme genius in an overlord force. However, when all these titles and identities were gathered on the same person, that would create an incomparably powerful and terrifying supreme genius. Di Haotian of the Heavenly God Sword sect. Even Grandma Withered Flower stopped moving for a moment. Even she had heard of Di Haotian's name, which showed how famous he was in the Nantian region. Faced with countless gazes, Di Haotian's expression was indifferent, as if he didn't care about anything. He first looked at the demonic fetus of flesh and blood that covered the sky and the demonic egg that was beating non-stop. Di Haotian frowned slightly. The power within the demonic egg caused the Emperor's sword in his forehead to buzz and tremble. It was very fearful. Interesting. However, what I need to do now is to take back my things. Di Haotian retracted his gaze and glanced indifferently. When he saw Gu Xiaoyang, Di Haotian was slightly surprised. Gu Xiaoyang, you're in such a sorry state, Di Haotian said. Gu Xiaoyang's expression was cold and a little ugly. He didn't say a word. They were both among the top 10 young masters, but Gu Xiaoyang was only a newly promoted one. Not to mention compared to the veteran Di Haotian. Even Jun Xiaoyao, young master Xiaoyao, was older than him. Although Gu Xiaoyang thought highly of himself, he was still slightly inferior in front of Di Haotian. It's my shame to be among the top 10 young masters like you, Di Haotian said indifferently. You. Gu Xiaoyang's expression turned stern. Everyone in the surroundings also fell silent. Di Haotian was probably the only one who dared to speak to Gu Xiaoyang with such an attitude. If Gu Xiaoyang thought highly of himself, then Di Haotian was truly arrogant. He didn't even enter the Dragon Phoenix list because he didn't want to be on the same level as those mediocre people. Di Haotian no longer paid attention to Gu Xiaoyang and finally looked at Su Jianshi. Su Jianshi clenched her fists tightly. She couldn't help but summon the Emperor's sword in her heart. Su Jianshi, you still can't escape from me. Di Haotian looked at Su Jianshi with a slight ripple in his eyes. There was no emotion in his eyes, only his obsession with the Emperor's sword. Di Haotian, for the Emperor's sword, your Heavenly God Sword sect destroyed my Su family. For the Emperor's sword, you chased us endlessly. For the Emperor's sword, the Longyuan village chief, Uncle Ghost Axe, and the others died. You bastard. Su Jianshi bit her lip until it bled. She angrily rebuked him while holding back the tears in her eyes. The heavens are heartless and treat all things as straw dogs. The saints are heartless and treat the people as straw dogs. Since they stopped me from getting the Emperor's sword, isn't it natural for them to die? Di Haotian's tone was indifferent and emotionless. It was as if the heavens were looking down on everything. Di Haotian, you will never get the Emperor's sword today. Ye Guqin endured his injuries and stood in front of Su Jianshi. He naturally couldn't let Su Jianshi face Di Haotian alone. Di Haotian's expression was still indifferent. Not to mention Ye Guqin's injuries, even if he was in peak condition, Di Haotian wouldn't put him in his eyes. Deal with the rest. I will personally dig out the Emperor's sword from Su Jianshi's heart. These incomparably cruel words came out of Di Haotian's mouth very calmly. Yes. The three sovereigns behind Di Haotian bowed and made their moves. Sovereign Chun, Grandma Chun. Sovereign Xia, Xia Lies Han. Sovereign Winter, Concubine Lang. The three of them moved and their auras surged out. Each of them was at the fourth firmament of the sovereign realm. Sovereign Winter, Concubine Lang, was at the seventh firmament of the sovereign realm. This caused Zhenggu and the two martial highnesses of the Heavenly Star dynasty to tremble. They were only at the first and second firmament of the sovereign realm. Grandma Withered Flower also retreated. Since there was someone making a move, there was no need for her to do it herself. Do you think you've already won? Yi Guqin's eyes flashed sharply when he saw Di Haotian's indifferent attitude. Di Haotian slowly stood in the air as flowers fell from the sky and golden lotuses bloomed from the ground. His aura wasn't as dense as the three sovereigns. But at this moment, it was as if he was the center of the world. I am the will of the heavens. Di Haotian spoke and his voice echoed throughout the world. Chapter 791. I am the will of the heavens. It was a simple sentence, but it was extremely domineering. Di Haotian stood in the sky like the sun, releasing endless radiance. He hadn't reached the supremacy realm yet. But at this moment, the pressure he exuded was like the might of the heavens, causing many cultivators to tremble as if they were facing a god. So what if you're the heavens? I, Yi Guqin, will not let you take Su Jianshi away even if I have to go against fate. Although Yi Guqin was heavily injured, he was still forcefully gathering the remaining true qi in his body. He couldn't just watch Su Jianshi be killed by Di Haotian. I'll go with you. Su Jianshi also began to activate the power of the human ruler's sword, preparing to fight to the death. Di Haotian didn't say a word, his eyes indifferent. However, the three venerables had already reached out their hands to grab Yi Guqin. Lowly ant, how can you resist in front of the young master? Supremacy Lang, Concubine Lang, was a beautiful woman with white skin. Her eyes were also indifferent and filled with disdain. In her eyes, even supremacies weren't qualified to put on airs in front of Di Haotian. Not to mention a cultivator in the life and death realm. He was even worse than an ant. She reached out her hand and grabbed Yi Guqin. With her strength at the seventh firmament, killing Yi Guqin was easier than breathing. Is Yi Guqin going to die? At this moment, the millions of cultivators and people from the various dynasties held their breaths. The disciples of the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas were furious. Yi Guqin was unyielding, but today, he was going to die in such a way. It was infuriating. No. Yan Wushuang closed her eyes in despair and almost fainted. Yi Guqin's friends, fellow apprentices, and companions gritted their teeth and trembled. But against the supremacies of the heavenly god's sword sect and Di Haotian, Yi Guqin had no chance of survival. On the other hand, Yi Guqin's enemies, from Zhenggu and the other martial highnesses to the Vermilion Bird Jade and Yuentian, all held their breaths. This was a young man who always exceeded their expectations and was always able to come back from the jaws of death. Was he finally going to die? Die, Concubine Lang waved her hand as if she was sweeping away dust. She wanted to obliterate Yi Guqin. Ha, good, good. All of you want to kill me, but can you do it? Yi Guqin's eyes were filled with disdain as he raised his head to the sky and roared. His black hair danced wildly in the wind as his aura surged to the heavens. Those venerables, those enemies, were doing everything they could to kill him. Situ Hongxue was being controlled by Grandma Withered Flower. She wanted him dead. Zhenggu and the others from the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion also wanted him dead. The venerables of the Heavenly Star Dynasty wanted him dead. The three venerables of the Heavenly God Sword Sect also wanted him dead. Looking around, he saw enemies everywhere. With the arrival of the Venerable One, life and death were in his hands. Today, I, Yi Guqin, will take my life. You, who dares to take it? Yi Guqin's aura surged, and his eyes seemed to be soaked in blood. So what if the heavens wanted him dead? He had broken free from the chains of fate. Yi Guqin's blood-red eyes shone with a divine light as if they could pierce through the heavens. A piece of the 5 divine beasts' ancient jade appeared in his hand. It was the ancient god's jade archive. Blackie and the divine eagle were beside him. Ancient Tao God seal, open. An unyielding will that went against the will of fate covered the surroundings. Yiguchen did not believe in fate. Whoever wanted him dead, he would kill them. The 5 divine beasts' ancient jade shone with an unprecedented light. At the same time, a 5-colored mark appeared between Blackie's eyebrows. As Yiguchen spoke, the mark between Blackie's eyebrows disappeared. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have stopped. Blackie, who was only a small ball with pitch-black fur and watery eyes, suddenly froze. In an instant, an endless blood-red color spread across those large pitch-black eyes. An extremely ruthless aura also spread out from them. Roar! Blackie roared into the sky, and endless sound waves burst out, shaking the universe and roaring in the 9 heavens and 10 realms. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Blackie's body burst out with endless black light, and pitch-black demonic patterns spread all over his body. His entire body suddenly expanded like a balloon. In the end, he turned into a terrifying demonic ape that was hundreds of feet tall. The 3 ferocious heads let out earth-shattering roars, as if 3,000 ancient demon lords were roaring at the same time. The 6 ape arms shook the heavens and broke the clouds. It seemed to be able to shatter the void for thousands of miles with a single clench. The chaotic world demonic ape of the 100 races had appeared. Roar! 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 The 3 heads of the chaotic world demonic ape let out earth-shattering roars, and endless sound waves burst out. Its huge body stood between heaven and earth like a primordial demonic mountain. Everyone was dumbfounded. The terrifying demonic energy and sound waves that burst out forced the surrounding million warriors to retreat. There were even some weaker martial artists who were directly shaken to death by the sound waves of the roars. Boom! The chaotic world demonic ape stomped 1 foot on the ground. Endless cracks spread across the ground, extending into the distance like an earthquake. The incomparably thick ape arm collided with the cold concubine's palm that was slapping towards him. Puchi. Leng Fei, whose cultivation was comparable to a 7th sky venerable, was forced to retreat, and she spat out blood from her red lips. Dumbfounded. Shocking. It was so horrifying that it felt like his liver and gallbladder were being torn apart. This is a silly monkey. The divine eagle was also dumbfounded. Its mouth was wide open, and all its feathers stood on end. This silly black monkey that had always been by its side and only knew how to squeak. Now, it had become so terrifying. This is Blackie? Su Jianxue was also dumbfounded, and her small mouth was wide open. Oh my God, what kind of monster is that? Retreat, retreat. Oh my God, it's too terrifying. Someone was killed by the sound waves. What is that? Why did Yiguchen release such a terrifying monster? All the warriors went crazy, and they hurriedly retreated in fear of being affected. Not to mention them, even Star Universe Sword Pavilion's Xinggu, the 2 sovereigns of the Heavenly Star Dynasty, Immortal Valley's Grandma Withered Flower, and even the 3 sovereigns revealed extreme surprise and fear in their eyes. What kind of monster was that? Ha! Didn't you say that you wanted to kill me? Come and kill me. Yiguchen's eyes were as red as blood. The chaotic world demonic ape seemed to feel Yiguchen's unyielding anger, and endless violence and flames burst out from its 6 pupils. It seemed to break all shackles. Although the chaotic world demonic ape had been unsealed, only its strength had been unsealed, not its memories. Therefore, although the chaotic world demonic ape could use its strength, its mind was still the same as Blackie's. It was on Yiguchen and the divine eagle's side. In the battle with the heavenly pupil monarch, the chaotic world demonic ape had fallen from the heavenly tribulation sage realm. However, it was still one of the 100 races in the universe. With all kinds of abilities, it was almost invincible among the venerables. Yiguchen's cold eyes were filled with disdain. He did not target Leng Fei immediately. His cold and indifferent eyes suddenly turned to the side and locked onto a hunched figure. It was Grandma Withered Flower. Old witch, I said that you will definitely die today. Blackie, kill her. Yiguchin's voice was as cold as ice as he pointed at Grandma Withered Flower. Roar. The chaotic world demonic ape let out an earth-shattering roar. It stretched out its thick ape arm and shook the void as it grabbed at Grandma Withered Flower. Damn it, you evil creature. Grandma Withered Flower's old face changed drastically, and it was almost distorted. Chapter 792. Grandma Withered Flower was extremely vicious. In order to perfect Situ Hongshue's 7 Despair Demon Heart, she had not hesitated to use the Heartless Talisman to control Situ Hongshue to attack Yiguchin. After being exposed, Grandma Withered Flower wanted to personally kill Yiguchin. Yiguchin had already made up his mind to kill someone like her. Therefore, Grandma Withered Flower had to die. Damn it, you evil creature, are you trying to provoke the Immortal Valley? Grandma Withered Flower's old face changed dramatically, turning pale in an instant. Although she was a sovereign, the master of the Immortal Valley had forcefully raised her strength from the divine dwelling stage to the sovereign stage. Therefore, Grandma Withered Flower's cultivation was only at the first layer of the sovereign stage. In the face of the ferocious chaotic world demonic ape, she was no different from a mortal. Heavenly Immortal Secret Technique. Grandma Withered Flower gathered all the true chi in her body, and a white glow spread from her old body. It turned into a ball of immortal light that enveloped her body in an attempt to block the chaotic world demonic ape's attack. However, before the chaotic world demonic ape's hand could reach her, the terrifying demonic chi that could destroy the 3 realms had already swept over, washing away Grandma Withered Flower's immortal light. Puchi. Grandma Withered Flower's technique was directly broken by the boundless demonic chi. Facing the chaotic world demonic ape's pillar-like arm, Grandma Withered Flower's entire body trembled. Although she was a servant, she came from the Immortal Valley and had always looked down on others with a superior gaze. Previously, she had even viewed Yiguchin as an ant that could be killed at any time. Now that the situation had reversed, she had become an ant. A sense of impending death assaulted Grandma Withered Flower's heart. For the first time in her life, she felt the feeling of death. This caused her old face to begin to distort. No, no. Yiguchin, spare my life. I personally brought Hongqin Shui back to the Immortal Valley. I am her benefactor. The contempt and arrogance in Grandma Withered Flower's eyes disappeared, replaced by the fear of death. Benefactor? Is that why you can control Situ Hongshue so brazenly and treat her as a puppet? Yiguchin's gaze was incomparably cold, without the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. Although it was Grandma Withered Flower who brought Situ Hongshue back to the Immortal Valley. However, it was hard to say whether this was good or bad for Situ Hongshue. Yiguchin always felt that Immortal Valley's relationship with Situ Hongshue wasn't that simple. Seeing that Yiguchin did not show any signs of holding back, Grandma Withered Flower's old face twisted as she roared, "You evil creature, if you kill me, the Supreme Immortal Valley will not let you off." Just a servant. Yiguchin's tone was cold. Boom. The chaotic world demonic ape's huge black hand grabbed Grandma Withered Flower. Grandma Withered Flower was like an ant in the palm of the chaotic world demonic ape. Then, Puchi, Grandma Withered Flower let out an incomparably shrill cry. Her voice was loud and filled with pain. The chaotic world demonic ape exerted force in its huge hand, and a scalp-numbing sound rang out. It was the sound of bones shattering and flesh grinding. It was extremely terrifying. The chaotic world demonic ape slowly released its huge hand, and Grandma Withered Flower's figure had long disappeared. What replaced her was a lump of flesh and blood that fell to the ground. The entire place was dead silent. Although there were more than 1,000,000 martial artists around, no one made a sound. This was because the scene in front of them was too shocking. Countless people's mouths were agape, and their eyes were dazed. A supremacy had been crushed to death just like that. It was as easy as crushing a little chick. The Immortal Valley's supremacy has been killed. Zhenggu, the supremacy of the Sky Star dynasty, and the others were also dazed, and their lips were trembling. That was someone from the Supreme Immortal Valley, one of the three great hidden forces. Even if she was just a servant, she was not someone that could be casually provoked. Even the overlord forces did not dare to casually kill someone from a hidden force. However, Yiguchin did not hesitate at all, and he let the chaotic world demonic ape crush her to death. Everyone present looked at Yiguchin, who was bathed in blood and covered in wounds. A chill ran down their spines. In the beginning, Yiguchin said that Grandma Withered Flower would definitely die today. Everyone took it as a joke and mocked Yiguchin. In the end, the bloody truth was right in front of them. The appearance of the chaotic world demonic ape made the faces of the supremacies change drastically, and their hearts twitched. Among everyone present, only one person's expression did not change at all. There was no surprise or fear. That person was Di Haotian. This is the chaotic world demonic ape race of the 100 races. Di Haotian's silver eyes were filled with mysterious runes as he looked at the chaotic world demonic ape. The 100 races of the 100 races were ancient history, and few people knew about them. However, Di Haotian saw through the origin of the chaotic world demonic ape at a glance. Although it's a little troublesome, it's only a supremacy. It's not so strong that we can't resist it. Di Haotian looked calm. If the chaotic world demonic ape was still a saint, then no one would be able to stop it today. Unfortunately, the chaotic world demonic ape only had the strength of a supremacy now. Although it was still invincible, it was not impossible to resist. The supremacies instantly understood. Deacon Zhenggu of the Starry Sword Pavilion shouted, "Everyone, let's join forces now. No matter how strong that beast is, it can't kill all of us." Zhenggu was really scared. He was also Yiguchin's mortal enemy. He was really afraid that he would be crushed to death like Grandma Withered Flower. Yes, let's join forces. The two supremacies of the Starry Sky dynasty also unleashed their auras. The three of you can join forces as well, Di Haotian said calmly. Yes. Leng Fei, Grandma Chun, and Xia Lizhan nodded. If it was a one-on-one battle, even Leng Fei, who had the highest cultivation, who was at the 7th heaven of the Venerable Realm, would definitely not be a match for the chaotic world demonic ape. Only by joining forces would they have a chance to survive. Kill, Star Soul Sword Technique. Zhenggu unleashed his supremacy strength. In the face of such a ferocious existence, if they still held back, they would be courting death. Kill. The two supremacies of the Starry Sky dynasty also attacked. Returning Spring Palm. Grandma Chun struck out with her supremacy aura that was at the 4th heaven. Delai Mountain King Fist. Xia Lizhan unleashed his supremacy strength at the 5th heaven and punched out. His genuine chi surged and the void trembled. It was as if a red mountain was pressing down on the chaotic world demonic ape. Ice God Seal. Leng Fei pushed out her hand. Her genuine chi condensed and turned into a palm print that suppressed the heavens. As the ice god seal condensed, the void seemed to be frozen. Endless cold air filled the air. In just a short moment, the supremacies of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Starry Sky Dynasty, and the Heavenly God Sword sect all attacked. A total of 6 supremacies used their ultimate moves at the same time. One could imagine the power of their attacks. Heaven and earth shook. Endless genuine chi raged. The 6 supremacies attacked at the same time. Their momentum shook heaven and earth as if they could flatten everything. They attacked the chaotic world demonic ape. Chapter 793. Who can withstand the attacks of the 6 venerables? The millions of martial artists had already retreated to a further distance to watch the battle. But even from a distance, they could still feel the terrifying power of the 6 venerables' attacks. The venerables of the Celestial Palace could even use the power of space. Some of the more powerful venerables could make the void tremble and increase the destructive power. Now that the 6 venerables were attacking together, who could stop them? No matter how fierce that monster is, it can't block the ultimate attacks of the 6 venerables at the same time, right? Many martial artists in the distance were frightened and whispered to each other. Ta Lin and the other disciples of the sword sect were praying for the chaotic world demonic ape, hoping that it could protect Yiguchen and resist the attacks of the six venerables. Roar! Facing the terrifying ultimate attacks of the six venerables, the three heads of the chaotic world demonic ape let out an earth-shattering roar. The six arms beat its chest, and the rumbling sound was like rolling thunder across the sky. Blackie, let them see the true power of the chaotic world demonic ape, one of the 100 races in the heavens. Yiguchen murmured. In the past, the chaotic world demonic ape and the heavenly Eye monarch fought a sacred battle that shattered the void and split the earth. Now, even if the chaotic world demonic ape was only in the Venerable's realm, its strength was far beyond everyone's imagination. The chaotic world demonic ape roared, and its 6 eyes were incomparably scarlet with boundless brutality. Above the sky, a pitch-black demonic realm appeared in the void. The 6 arms of the chaotic world demonic ape swept out, and the demonic realm shattered. Countless huge pitch-black fragments fell towards the 6 venerables like meteorites from outer space. Demonic annihilation tenfold realm. Every piece of the black shard caused the void to tremble. Not to mention that there were hundreds and thousands of them, which almost made the void boil. Boom! The indescribably terrifying collision waves swept in all directions. The fierce air waves turned into a violent wind, and the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth experts couldn't even stand steadily. Rumble. The violent collision sounds were deafening, as if 100,000 heavenly thunders had exploded. It's too terrifying. Is this a battle between venerables? That monster should be dead, right? Over 1 million pairs of eyes were focused on the center of the battle. The ground was covered with countless ravines and cracks, as well as countless craters, which were created by those pitch-black fragments. The 6 martial highnesses were knocked backward. Zhenggu, a venerable from the Heavenly Star dynasty, who was slightly weaker, spat out blood. Granny Chun's body also shook as blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Xiao Yishan's arm was bleeding. Only concubine Leng, who was at the 7th heaven of the venerable realm, was only pushed back, but she still felt very uncomfortable. The 6 venerables looked at the place where the smoke and dust were rolling with a grave expression. That monster should be dead by now. Zhenggu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said. He didn't doubt in the slightest that if he was alone just now, he would have perished long ago. In such a suffocating silence. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar was heard. The terrifying and transparent sound waves blew away the thick smoke and dust. The chaotic world demonic ape's terrifying demonic body, which was hundreds of feet tall, was revealed to everyone. He was completely unharmed. How is this possible? Zhenggu and the Heavenly Star Dynasty's Honorable Sir roared in disbelief. The 3 martial highnesses of the Heavenly God's Sword sect also looked extremely grave. This monster. Concubine Leng's expression was somewhat ugly. The 1 million martial artists who were watching the battle from the outside were also completely stunned at this moment. The 6 martial highnesses attacked together, but they couldn't hurt the monster at all. That little monkey following by senior brother Ye's side is actually so terrifying. All the disciples of the Sword Sect's Forest of Towers swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Yen Wushuang and the others were slightly relieved. With such a ferocious beast guarding him, at least Yiguchen's safety would be greatly guaranteed. Putting aside how shocked the many warriors were, the provocation of the 6 great Dozuns in the battle had caused the 6 pupils of the chaotic world demon ape, which had a tyrannical character, to burn with different flames. 6-path demonic seal. Inferno prison burns the world. A terrifying demonic voice that seemed to come from the primordial world roared out. The infuriated chaotic world demonic ape also started to use its own special ability. 6-path demonic flames. 6 different colored flames spewed out of the chaotic world demonic ape's eyes. The flames burned as if it had turned into a fiery prison, imprisoning the surroundings. The void was burned until it was distorted. A random spark fell on the ground, and it turned into a piece of scorched earth. The 6 martial highnesses were imprisoned in the fiery prison, and it was difficult for them to resist. The chaotic world demonic ape fought against the 6 martial highnesses alone. Absolute zero. Concubine Leng let out a loud roar. She still underestimated the chaotic world demonic ape's strength. Endless cold air spread out from her body, fighting against the 6 demonic flames. At the same time, the other 5 martial highnesses also took out various treasures to fight against the chaotic world demonic ape. Looking at the endless battle, everyone felt their throats dry up. The chaotic world demonic ape's strength was far beyond their expectations. Not only could it resist the killing moves of the 6 martial highnesses, but it also showed signs of suppressing them. Not far away, Yiguchen sighed slightly when he saw the situation. If the chaotic world demonic ape was in its peak state, it could probably kill the 6 martial highnesses with one hand. It was a pity that its cultivation level had dropped because of the heavenly pupil king. However, on second thought, if not, the heavenly pupil king would not have sealed the chaotic world demonic ape, and he would not have allowed it to follow Yiguchen. Is this really Blackie? Su Jianxue stood beside Yiguchen, her eyes filled with disbelief. After all, Blackie had been with them every day. In Su Jianxue's eyes, Blackie was just a silly and cute monkey. I should say that this is the real Blackie. Yiguchen smiled faintly. The battle between the martial highnesses continued. As time passed, everyone looked on in shock and disbelief. They found that the 6 martial highnesses were unable to hold on any longer, as if they were about to collapse. Especially Zhenggu and the 2 martial highnesses from the Sky Star dynasty. They were only at the 2nd heaven, and they could not withstand the chaotic world demonic ape's attacks. Lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The chaotic world demonic ape roared into the sky, and its already huge demonic body grew again. It was almost 1,000 feet tall, like a majestic primordial demonic mountain. Rumble. After the chaotic world demonic ape grew bigger, its roar shook the sky. It stomped toward Zhenggu and the other martial highnesses who were slightly weaker. Damn it! Retreat! Zhenggu and the 2 martial highnesses from the Sky Star dynasty were horrified. The stomp was like a piece of pitch-black sky falling down, and there was no way to dodge it. Retreat! Leng Fei and the other martial highnesses from the Sky God Sword sect also retreated. The chaotic world demonic ape was too ferocious. Boom! Under the shocked gazes of all the martial artists, Zhenggu and the 2 martial highnesses from the Sky Star dynasty were trampled under the chaotic world demonic ape's feet. No one doubted that Zhenggu and the others were still alive. It was simply impossible. The chaotic world demonic ape lifted its foot, and 3 piles of flesh appeared in the depths of the pit. Hiss! Countless gasps resounded in all directions. After Grandma Withered Flower was crushed to death by the chaotic world demonic ape, Zhenggu and the other 2 martial highnesses were also trampled to death by the chaotic world demonic ape. What kind of monstrous demonic power was this? Is it possible that Yiguchen will be able to escape today? Many martial artists looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Even Gu Xiaoyang's face was completely frozen. The martial highnesses from the Starry Sword Pavilion were trampled to death. This beast. Leng Fei's face was extremely ugly. With their strength, they could not deal with the chaotic world demonic ape at all. Then, the chaotic world demonic ape attacked again, and the 3 martial highnesses from the Sky God Sword sect were almost beaten to the point of vomiting blood. They could not hold on for long. Master. Leng Fei gritted her teeth, but did not say anything. Di Haotian's face was still indifferent, as if he could not see that they were injured. Finally, it's here. Di Haotian seemed to have sensed something, and the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. Roar! Just as the chaotic world demonic ape was about to use its ultimate move again. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the void. When the figure appeared, Yiguchen's pupils suddenly shrank. An unprecedentedly powerful pressure enveloped the entire land. Could it be? Yiguchen took a deep breath, and his face darkened. Chapter 794. The figure that suddenly appeared in the void was an elder in a silver robe. His hair and beard were white, and he looked otherworldly. However, his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. The space around him seemed to be slightly distorted. At this moment, he glanced at the huge demonic fetus floating in the void. When he saw the demonic egg in the middle of the demonic fetus, his eyes turned solemn with a hint of passion. In just an instant, the elder's eyes were attracted by the huge chaotic demonic ape. "How dare you kill the people of Starry Universe Sword Pavilion?" The silver-robed elder's eyes turned gloomy. He raised his withered palm and grabbed at the void. All of a sudden, the spiritual chi in the surrounding area gathered crazily in his palm. Finally, it turned into a giant palm print and pressed down on the chaotic world demonic ape. Roar! The chaotic demonic ape also sensed extreme danger. Its 3 heads roared at the sky, and the 6 ape arms each showed the shadow of a demonic spear and a demonic saber. There were a total of 6 demonic sabers. It was as if it was controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation, and it attacked the palm print released by the elder. It was the 6 paths forbidden demon, the beginning of all demons. Boom! The majestic aftershock swept through the surroundings like a wave that could destroy heaven and earth. Thump! 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 With 3 loud bangs, the chaotic demonic ape was pushed back 3 steps. The faces of all the spectators who saw this scene froze. The chaotic demonic ape was so fierce that it could withstand the attacks of 6 honorables with its demonic body and even kill 3 of them. However, it was pushed back 3 steps by the elder's palm print. A bloody palm print appeared on the chaotic demonic ape's body, and it was bleeding. "The monster is injured," some sharp-eyed martial artists exclaimed. It was the first time they saw the chaotic demonic ape bleeding since the battle started. Blackie! Yiguchin's face changed slightly. Roar! The chaotic world demonic ape stared at the silver-robed elder in the sky with its 6 pairs of ferocious eyes filled with murderous intent. As expected of the chaotic demonic ape clan. Its skin is tough. Seeing that he had only pushed back the chaotic demonic ape, the silver-robed elder frowned slightly. Elder! Elder Xinggu! In the distance, Gu Xiaoyang was overjoyed. The newcomer was none other than Elder Xinggu of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, a false saint expert. An elder of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion is here. False saint, that's a false saint expert. He actually came here too. Upon hearing Gu Xiaoyang's words, many martial artists revealed shock in their eyes. In the overlord forces, if the heavenly tribulation saints did not appear, the pseudo-saints would be the ones in charge. However, at this moment, there was actually a false saint expert here, causing everyone to be shocked. Among the millions of warriors around, almost 80% of them had never seen a false saint in their entire lives. Xiaoyang, why are you in such a sorry state? When Elder Xinggu saw Gu Xiaoyang's miserable state, his face was slightly stunned. He couldn't think of anyone in the same generation who could injure Gu Xiaoyang like this. Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened and his eyes were extremely cold. He pointed at Yiguchin and said, "This man used despicable means to steal my innate sword embryo." What? Elder Xinggu's expression changed slightly. Previously, when Zhenggu told him to come to the Saint Origin dynasty, he only told him that Yiguchin had killed Li Sun, Song Yuyao, and the others. Gu Xiaoyang came alone, so Elder Xinggu didn't know that Gu Xiaoyang's innate sword embryo had been stolen by Yiguchin. Hearing Gu Xiaoyang's words, Yiguchin's face became colder. What did he mean by despicable means? Yiguchin had paid a great price to use the Eye of Void hidden. Besides, in terms of despicable means, wasn't Gu Xiaoyang, who had personally dug out his innate sword embryo from his dantian, more despicable? You killed a deacon and a genius of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion and even stole Gu Xiaoyang's innate sword embryo. You are very brave. Elder Xinggu's face was calm. However, there was an emotionless coldness hidden in his calm words. A cold murderous intent spread out from him. Does that innate sword embryo belong to Gu Xiaoyang? Your Starry Universe Sword Pavilion is really overbearing. Even in the face of Elder Xinggu, who was at the false saint level, Yi Guqin still frowned coldly. It doesn't matter. Since you stole it, you can just take it back. Since you dared to kill a member of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, you can't survive today. Elder Xinggu's tone was indifferent. That simple sentence determined Yi Guqin's fate. Roar. As if it had heard Elder Xinggu's contempt, the chaotic world demonic ape let out a violent roar. Boundless black demon chi surged out. You evil creature, you must have been injured before. If you were in your best condition, I might not be able to do anything to you. Unfortunately, you are only at the venerable realm now. Elder Xinggu's tone was indifferent. Although the chaotic world demonic ape was strong, Elder Xinggu was at the false saint realm. Although he couldn't kill the chaotic world demonic ape, he could still suppress it. At this time, the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion's flying boat in the distance arrived. There were 3 deacons of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion standing on it. They were all at the venerable realm. Another 3 venerables. It seems that even if Yi Guqin has the help of the monster, he won't be able to escape today. Some cultivators shook their heads when they saw this. How could this be? All the disciples of the Sword Sect's forest of towers were pale. Yan Wushuang bit her lips until they bled. Even a false saint realm expert had appeared. How could Yi Guqin survive? Princess Feng Shi, Kenpo, and the others were also helpless. In front of such an existence, they were so insignificant. However, as if to deliberately shock everyone, another silver warship sailed over from the other side of the sky. There were 3 people standing on the bow of the ship. The leader was an old man in a starry sky royal robe. His body carried a domineering aura. What was even more shocking was that the aura of this old man was the same as Elder Xinggu's. Shockingly, it was another false saint realm expert. That's Heavenly Star Dynasty's Grand Emperor, Xing Mo. Many people couldn't hide the surprise and shock on their faces. The second false saint realm expert had arrived, and he also had a grudge against Yi Guqin. This was because the Xinghong Crown Prince was dead. Although he didn't die at the hands of Yi Guqin. However, Yi Guqin and the others had entered the ancient demon city, and only Yi Guqin and the others had come out. Therefore, there was no need to explain. Everyone assumed that Yi Guqin had killed the Xinghong Crown Prince and Zhou Heng. However, this was not the only thing that was more shocking. In the other side of the sky, another red warship sailed over. There was a flag at the bow of the ship, and on the flag was a rising sun. That's the flag of the Dongfang family. Some of the martial artists from the top dynasties were slightly more knowledgeable. When they saw the flag, their eyes were filled with shock. Heh! I didn't expect that someone from a low-level dynasty would dare to kill the people of the Dongfang family. How bold! A red-robed middle-aged man stepped out of the warship. Although he was smiling, his tone was cold. The patriarch is here. Dongfang Shuri and Dongfang Ziyun, who were hiding in the distance, were delighted. The third false saint realm expert had arrived. Chapter 795. With the arrival of the 3 false saints, the aura of the entire world seemed to be disturbed. Ripples appeared in the void. Even the ferocious chaotic world demonic ape was suppressed by the aura of the 3 experts. No matter how it roared, it couldn't escape the pressure of the 3 false saints. Starry Sword Pavilion, Elder Xinggu. Starry Dynasty, Grand Emperor Xing Mo Dongfang Aoyang, the patriarch of the Dongfang family's side branch. In addition to the 3 false saints, the Starry Sword Pavilion also sent 3 venerable deacons. The Starry Dynasty also sent 2 venerables. The Dongfang family also sent 2 venerables. In addition, there were 3 venerables from the Heavenly God Sword sect. There were 3 false saints and 10 venerables from the Heavenly Palace here. This was an extremely terrifying number. What was even more terrifying was that these experts all had a grudge against Yi Guqin. With this power added together, it would be enough to wipe out a slightly weaker top-notch empire. Not to mention dealing with Yiguchin and the others. So it's Xing-Mo. Do you also have a grudge against him? Elder Xing-Gu knew Xing-Mo. Xing-Mo was once an elder of the Starry Sword Pavilion, but he was expelled because of a mistake. In the end, he established the Starry Dynasty alone. My grandson should have died in his hands. Xing-Mo's eyes were cold as he looked at Yiguchin. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Yiguchin's lips curled into a sneer. He didn't want to explain too much. No matter how he explained, these people wouldn't let him go. Then Dongfang Hong and the two venerables of the Dongfang family did die in your hands? Dongfang Aoyang's tone was also very cold. He was a little surprised that Yiguchin had the means to kill the two venerables of the Dongfang family in an instant. But he believed that Yiguchin couldn't have casually used such a move. Aside from this, Yiguchin was just a life and death threshold. Normally, he wouldn't even have the chance to talk to these false saints. Ha! If you want to fight, then let's fight. What's the point of talking so much? Yiguchin raised his head and laughed. Su Jianshi stood beside Yiguchin and said, I'll face it with you. Aside from these experts, there was still Gu Shaoyang and Di Haoyan. Today, they were in a completely hopeless situation. Looks like this chaotic world demonic ape has given you too much confidence. Since that's the case, why don't the two of you deal with these little troubles first before joining forces to explore the flesh devil fetus? Elder Xing-Gu said. Sure. Xing-Mo nodded. Dongfang Aoyang hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. The devil egg in the flesh and blood devil fetus must contain a great secret. The faint ripples it emitted made the three false saints feel a little apprehensive. However, it was clear that the demonic egg was still in the midst of brewing. The thing inside it had yet to completely break out. Therefore, the three of them joined forces to explore the area for the sake of caution. I wonder if there are any ancient famed swords among them. Elder Xing-Gu thought to himself. But right now, they still needed to deal with Yiguchin, this little trouble. Elder Xing-Gu said, you guys make your move. This old man and the others will suppress the chaotic world demonic ape. Yes. The three sovereigns of the Starry Sword Pavilion soared into the sky. The two sovereigns of the Starry Dynasty also made their move. The two sovereigns behind Dongfang Aoyang also flashed out. As for the three sovereigns of the Heavenly God Sword sect, they naturally had to help Di Haoyan capture Su Jianshi. Roar! Seeing that the sovereigns had made their move, the chaotic world demonic ape let out another roar that shook the sky. 6 demonic flames spread out once again. At the same time, the chaotic world demonic ape raised its hand and clawed. Endless demonic chi rolled out and turned into a giant staff that swept across the area. You bastard, how dare you be so fierce! Elder Xing-Gu reached out his hand, and the power of a false saint erupted. A star seal pressed down, causing the space to distort slightly. Xing-Mo also made his move. He clawed at the chaotic world demonic ape with one hand, and the surrounding space seemed to distort as a powerful destructive force burst out. Dongfang Aoyang raised his hand, and endless true chi and soul energy converged into a blazing ball of light. It was as dazzling as the sun, releasing endless light and heat. He pressed down with his hand, and the small sun-like ball of light traversed the void, drawing out waves of spatial ripples as it attacked the chaotic world demonic ape. This wasn't the 6 sovereigns from before, but 3 false saints. False saints were those whose cultivation had reached the threshold of the saint realm, but had yet to pass the heavenly tribulation. Although their strength wasn't as strong as a true saint, they were far more powerful than sovereigns. Just like before, when the 6 venerables made a move, any false saint could easily crush them. As long as there was the word saint, it meant that they had transcended the mortal world, even if there was the word false in front. Roar! Facing the suppression of 3 false saints, the chaotic world demonic ape was still ferocious. Rumbling sounds of collision were incessant. However, the chaotic world demonic ape was still blasted back in the end, and wounds of various sizes appeared on its body. The surging and erupting demonic energy seemed to have been extinguished by a lot. It's almost at its limit. Yiguchen's face turned solemn when he saw this. The simultaneous suppression of 3 false saints had far exceeded the chaotic world demonic ape's ability to withstand. If it was at its peak, the chaotic world demonic ape could easily crush the 3 false saints, but now, it was only in the sovereign realm. Fortunately, the chaotic world demonic ape had a special ability, the indestructible demonic body. Even if its body was dripping with blood and injured in many places, its vitality didn't weaken at all. It was just that its strength would gradually be suppressed. In the end, you still can't go against the heavens. Leng Fei and the others looked at Yiguchen with indifferent expressions. With their strength as sovereigns, attacking Yiguchen was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. However, Yiguchen had used the chaotic world demonic ape to injure Leng Fei and the others, which had completely enraged them. Now that they attacked, they naturally wouldn't care about the sovereign's reputation. Ha, Yiguchen, after going around in circles, the Khanate sword embryo will return to me in the end. Gu Xiaoyang couldn't help but laugh. Although he was still injured, he had stabilized himself. If it weren't for Yiguchen's Eye of the Void, Gu Xiaoyang wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Therefore, his hatred for Yiguchen was even deeper. On the other side, Di Haotian's expression was indifferent as he stood in the void. Whether it was the appearance of the chaotic world demonic ape or the false saints, his expression didn't change much. At this moment, his silver eyes were only focused on Su Jianshi. He didn't care about Yiguchen at all. I can finally get the human sovereign sword. Then I'll find the earth sovereign sword and combine the 3 swords. Then the 3 sovereign saint swords will reappear in the world, and I, Haotian Dragon, will be the master of the 3 sovereigns. Di Haotian's silver eyes flashed. Only at this moment would his emotions fluctuate. Die, ants. There was no need for the 10 sovereigns to attack at the same time. Leng Fei reached out her hand and attacked Yiguchen and the others. Su Jianshi's body tensed up. She turned her head and looked at Yiguchen, who was covered in blood. Yiguchen's eyes didn't show any fear of death. Even in such a desperate situation, he frowned and thought of a way out. I don't want to be born on the same day, I only want to die on the same day. Su Jianshi's hand secretly grabbed Yiguchen's blood-stained hand. It wasn't bad to die with the person she loved. Boom! Leng Fei's palm landed. The sound of someone vomiting blood was heard. However, it wasn't from Yiguchen or Su Jianshi. A slender figure in cotton clothes stood in front of Yiguchen like a pillar that could support the sky. These words came out of his mouth. How dare you attack my disciple? The divine wind sword will show no mercy. Chapter 796. No one had expected such a sudden scene to occur before their eyes. There was actually someone who dared to stand in front of Yiguchen at such a critical moment. One should know that the 3 false saints and the 10 sovereigns wanted Yiguchen dead. Today, no one could stop Yiguchen from falling. It was as if it was destined. However, it was in such an absolute and unbreakable deadlock that they were in. There was actually someone who dared to stand in front of Yiguchen in the face of a group of experts. What kind of courage did one have to be to do such a thing? Master! Yiguchen's pupils suddenly shrank. A thin figure in cotton clothes stood in front of him. The figure wasn't very tall, but at this moment, it was like a backbone that supported the sky, blocking Leng Fei's attack. Who else could it be but Feng Manlu? Cough. Feng Manlu retreated a dozen steps as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Everyone was dumbfounded, especially those who were native to the Saint Origin dynasty. Lightless Sword King, Feng Manlu. The legendary sword cultivator of the dynasty. He was born blind, but with his monstrous talent in the sword Dao, he suppressed the entire dynasty. At the top of the Forbidden City, he laughed proudly in the sky. He went against the heavens and killed Xian Wuji, who had just become a sovereign. His sword swept across the dynasty and no one was his match. In everyone's eyes, including Yiguchen's. Their impression of Feng Manlu was that he was a handsome man with an inconspicuous aura and a calm and peaceful expression. He had never been defeated and had never been pushed back. But now, Feng Manlu was pushed back for the first time, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. This was also the first time Ye Guqin saw Feng Manlu injured. After all, no matter how heaven-defying Feng Manlu was, he was only at the 7th level of the Divine Palace realm. It was already good that he could withstand the palm of Leng Fei, who was at the 7th level of the Venerable realm. It was inevitable that he would be injured. Master, you can't. Ye Guqin wanted to go forward, but his chest shook violently and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Su Jianshi pulled Ye Guqin back and said, "Silly brat, your injuries are too heavy. Don't be reckless." Ye Guqin's injuries were too severe. First, he used the Eye of the Void, which consumed too much of his strength. Even his spiritual sea was on the verge of collapse. Then, he was pierced by Situ Hongshua's sword, which severely injured him. At this moment, he didn't have much energy left. But Ye Guqin coughed up blood, his expression terrifyingly cold. He was such a person. No matter how injured he was, or even if he died, he would not be afraid. However, he could not let others die because of him. It was the same for Su Jianshi and now it was the same for Feng Manlu. Heh. I've already said that I won't let my disciple face everything alone. Be at ease, and stand behind me. Feng Manlu wiped the blood off the corner of his mouth and spoke in a calm tone. It was as if these were just ordinary words and not a matter of life and death. The millions of martial artists watching the battle from afar were all slightly moved by these words. An Exin, stand behind me. How many people would be able to calmly say such words under the pressure of such an expert? This pair of master and disciple is really amazing, many martial artists of the various dynasties sighed. Uncle Feng, Ye Guqin. Yan Wushuang bit her lips, and the taste of blood filled her mouth. Manlu. Yan Chang'e clenched his fists tightly, his body trembling. If it weren't for the fact that he still had to take care of the thousands of disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, he would have stepped forward and stood with Feng Manlu. But because of his responsibility, he couldn't do so. At this moment, the millions of martial artists present were all focused on the figure in the fluttering cotton robe. Even the 3 false saints who were suppressing the chaotic world demon ape were a little surprised. They didn't expect that there would be someone who would die for Ye Guqin at such a critical moment. A little 7th level divine dwelling dares to step forward. Leng Fei frowned. The other sovereigns also looked at Feng Manlu as if they were looking at a dead man. In their eyes, a divine dwelling expert was no different from Ye Guqin. They were both ants that could be easily crushed. If you want to kill my disciple, you have to step over my dead body first. Feng Manlu's long hair fluttered in the wind, and sword intent surged from his body. A hurricane seemed to erupt in the surrounding void, piercing through the sky and earth. At this moment, Feng Manlu seemed to have turned into a peerless divine sword. The man was the sword, and the sword was the man. There was no fear in the heart, and the sword was invincible. Man and sword as one, reappearing. At the same time, Feng Manlu also activated the power of the flawless divine dwelling in his body, and his aura soared again. Sword light seemed to burst out from his hollow eyes. Kill! Feng Manlu, who had always been calm, had turned into a killing god of the sword in order to protect his disciple. Boom! The battle began again. And this. It was destined to be a desperate battle. Boom! Boom! Leng Fei's lips curved in a sneer, but she didn't make a move. A 3rd-level heaven sovereign from the Tianqing Empire attacked Feng Manlu. Cough! Feng Manlu's body shook, and he was pushed back again. Blood gushed out from the corner of his mouth. He actually blocked it. The Venerable One was also surprised. His palm strike couldn't kill a 7th-level divine dwelling. Man and sword as one, in addition to the transformation of the divine dwelling, he has such strength. Leng Fei was a little surprised. Even so, the outcome was already decided. Let me do it. A fourth heavenly layer venerable from a side branch of the Dongfang family made his move again. His palm turned into a crystallized palm print and collided with Feng Manlu. Boom! Feng Manlu was pushed back again. His spotless clothes were stained with blood, like peach blossoms. All of you deserve to die. Yi Guchen's anger surged to the 9 heavens. The sovereigns took turns to attack as if they were playing a game. Let me see how many palms this 7th-level divine dwelling can take. A 4th-level heaven sovereign from the Starry Sword Pavilion attacked again. Boom! I'll give it a try. Granny Chun from the Heavenly God Sword sect also pulled out a sinister smile and attacked. Puff! Feng Manlu was sent crashing to the ground with a loud bang. All the disciples from the Sword sect's Tower Forest were devastated. Uncle Feng. Yen Wushuang was heartbroken. Yen Chang's eyes were red, and his aura surged. Don't attack. If you attack, not only the Sword sect's Tower Forest, but even the Yen Yun dynasty will be implicated. Yen Bailin pressed on Yen Chang's shoulder. Feng Manlu, who always had a warm smile on his face, was covered in blood as he slowly stood up from the pit. His face was covered in blood. But his expression didn't change at all. No matter how heaven-defying Feng Manlu was, it was already his limit to withstand the attacks of so many sovereigns. He was able to kill Xian Wuji in defiance of the natural order, and was even able to contend against a second heavenly layer venerable expert at the divine dwelling stage. But the 10 sovereigns in front of him were too powerful. They were like 10 mountains that suppressed everything. Forget it. It's too boring. Just kill them. The corner of Leng Fei's mouth twitched. She no longer paid attention to Feng Manlu, who was covered in blood, but grabbed at Yi Guchen and Su Jianshi. Feng Manlu teleported and stood in front of Yi Guchen and the others again. Since you want to die so much, I'll let you die first. Leng Fei's face turned cold when she saw Feng Manlu intervening again. The aura of a 7th-level heaven sovereign erupted and blasted towards Feng Manlu. Master! Yi Guchen's face changed dramatically. Yen Chang'e, Yen Wushuang, and the others, including the people of the Saint Origin dynasty, felt their hearts freeze. Could it be that the lightless sword sovereign, who had dominated the dynasty, was going to fall today? Ha ha ha, what joy is there in life, what bitterness is there in death? In my life, I have a close friend, a beloved disciple, Leng Yu, and the sword will song. That's enough. Feng Manlu threw his head back and laughed. He was carefree like a sword immortal. Even though he was covered in blood, it didn't detract from his heroic appearance. I use my sword to open a path for life. With my body as a sacrifice, my sword will cut through the heavens. As his voice faded, the blood vessels in Feng Manlu's body exploded as he sacrificed himself. A boundless sword will overturn the 8 desolates and 9 worlds, breaking through the heavens. The violent waves shook the boundless world. Chapter 797. Feng Manlu was covered in blood. It was as if he had been soaked in a pool of blood. Blood-red flames were burning on the surface of his body. It was the fire of life that Feng Manlu had ignited by burning his qi and blood. As the fire of life surged, Feng Manlu's aura rose once again. 8th heaven of the divine dwelling realm. 9th heaven of the divine dwelling realm. Half-step honorable realm. Manlu, you can't do that. Yen Chang'e's expression changed when he saw this from afar. He suddenly shouted. He knew what Feng Manlu had used. Blood sacrifice secret technique. Using one's life as a sacrifice to unleash his strongest strength. That was almost the pinnacle of wind-sweeping building, a battle of life and death. After using the blood sacrifice secret technique, Feng Manlu was on the verge of losing his life. Uncle Feng, no. Yen Wushuang let out a heart-wrenching scream. Lord Feng Manlu. All the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest cried out crazily. The people of the Saint Origin dynasty also took a deep breath. While they were shocked, they also felt a sense of desolation and sorrow. The lightless Sword King, Feng Manlu, who had dominated the dynasty for a long time and was extremely talented in the sword Dao, was about to meet his end in such a manner. It was somewhat unbearable. Wind God's single sword, laughing proudly in the sky. Feng Manlu's hair fluttered as endless blood gushed out from his body. A translucent green divine wine sword emerged from Feng Manlu's body. A terrifying sword chi that could slash the heavens and split the void in all directions pierced through the heavens and the earth. Wind Mark. The green divine wind sword swept across the void. Endless sword chi exploded in the air, producing a tearing sound. Boom! The shockwave from the collision spread out. Feng Manlu spurted out another mouthful of blood as he retreated. However, he managed to block Leng Fei's attack. This. Even Leng Fei was surprised. Feng Manlu's aura had reached the half-step honorable realm. It's just a secret technique. Even so, a half-step honorable realm expert is still an ant in my eyes. Xia Lieshan shook his head slightly, his eyes indifferent. Master. Yi Guqin clenched his fist tightly. He knew that Feng Manlu was sacrificing his life to unleash his strongest strength. Ice God Seal. Concubine Leng made another move. Her jade-like hand pressed down and turned into a giant ice crystal seal, pressing down on Feng Manlu. This was an emperor-level martial art. With Leng Fei's strength at the seventh heaven, one could imagine how powerful it was. Reincarnation Sword Lotus. As Feng Manlu raised his hand, a powerful sword chi gushed out and surged in the void. Finally, it turned into a gigantic golden sword lotus that was thousands of feet tall. A complete 360-leaf reincarnation sword lotus. Boom! The violent collision spread out, dispersing the clouds in the sky. The earth trembled, and endless sandstorms surged. In such an extreme collision, Feng Manlu retreated again and spat out a mouthful of blood. The bone-chilling coldness emitted by the ice god's seal almost froze Feng Manlu's internal organs. However, Feng Manlu's blood and chi were burning all over his body. His flame of life was burning fiercely, and he actually managed to dispel the chill. Of course, Feng Manlu's life force was also being depleted rapidly. He wouldn't be able to live for much longer. You really are an unkillable ant. Seeing that Feng Manlu was still alive, even Leng Fei frowned slightly. Don't waste any more time. Just kill him, Xia Lieshan said. The 10 honorables stepped out at the same time. Their auras gushed out and directly suppressed Feng Manlu. Feng Manlu coughed out blood, and all his bones seemed to have been crushed. The 10 honorables attacked together. Just the pressure of their auras alone was enough to cause the flesh and blood of those below the honorable realm to explode. It was already very difficult for Feng Manlu to hold on with the strength of a half-step honorable realm. Master. Yi Guqin was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood. His eyes were blood-red, and he glanced at the 10 honorables and the 3 false saints. Starry Sword Pavilion, Dongfang Family, Divine Sword Sect, Sky Star Dynasty. If I, Yi Guqin, don't die today, you will all be destroyed in the future. Yi Guqin's sword demon state had long been calm. There were very few things that could really anger him. However, today, at this moment, Yi Guqin was really angry. His anger was so strong that it seemed like it could burn the sky. At the same time, he deeply understood that even though his strength was outstanding among the younger generation, he was still as weak as an ant in the eyes of the overlord forces, the honorables, and the false sacred masters. At this moment, the 10 honorables were like 10 mountains that stood in the sky. Feng Manlu, covered in blood, resisted the pressure of the 10 honorables alone. The bones in his body cracked and shattered inch by inch. Blood flowed out from his skin, and the surface of his skin began to crack. Sigh. Many of the local martial artists of Saint Origin Dynasty couldn't bear to see such a scene. Some of the sword cultivators even turned their heads away with red eyes. Who would have thought that the Sword King, Feng Manlu, would die in such a way? It was a dead end that couldn't be solved. However, Feng Manlu was still unmoved. His iron-blood loyal heart didn't waver. Feng Manlu's sword intent heart traceless, his courage illuminates Kunlun. Disciple, look, it's done. Feng Manlu, who was covered in blood, suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was intermittent and weak. Master. You. Yi Guqin's body trembled. He felt like he was bidding farewell to his master. This is the last sword that I can teach you, Feng Manlu revealed a blood-stained smile. He used his right hand as a sword and slowly raised it, pointing it at the sky. In this world, there is nothing that the edge of the sword can't cut, the brave is fearless, and the edge of the sword is invincible. Feng Manlu raised his head, his black hair fluttering in the wind. An unprecedented and terrifying sword concept spread out from Feng Manlu's body. The surging sword concept could overturn the entire world. The sword chi was so powerful that it could break through the sky. The sword concept far surpassed the union of man and sword. Did Feng Manlu only comprehend the union of man and sword after 10 years of seclusion in the sword sect pagoda? No. It was far more than that. At this moment, Feng Manlu's sword concept spread out. Among the millions of martial artists, the swords in the origin rings of all the sword cultivators began to tremble. The swords in the origin rings of all the sword cultivators seemed to have been summoned. Shortly after, they broke open their origin rings and flew out. What? What is going on? Why did my sword fly out? Mine too. Among the millions of martial artists present, there were at least 200,000 sword cultivators. The swords within these 200,000 cultivators' origin rings all broke through the air at the same time. 1 sword. 2 swords. 3 swords, 3,000 swords. 5,000 swords, 10,000 swords. 100,000 swords. The swords of all the disciples in the sword sect pagoda all soared into the sky. Even the Xianming heavy sword in Yi Guqin's hand broke through the sky uncontrollably. What was even more shocking was that the mortal emperor's sword in Su Jianchu's body. Although it did not break through the sky, it was trembling violently as if it had been infected. What was even more shocking was that the emperor's sword between Di Haotian's eyebrows began to tremble. This simply shocked everyone. All the swords of the sword cultivators present seemed to have been summoned by Feng Manlu's sword concept and were being used by him. This reaction did not differentiate between friend and foe. Even the swords in the origin rings of some of the 10 sovereigns, such as the sovereigns of the Starry Sword Pavilion, uncontrollably soared into the sky. What a shocking scene! More than 200,000 swords covered the sky and covered the sun as they soared into the sky. At this moment, Feng Manlu, whose clothes were stained with blood, was in the center of these 200,000 swords. This was called 10,000 swords paying homage. Chapter 798. It was hard to imagine such a shocking scene. Feng Manlu stood alone in the sky. He used his right hand as a sword and pointed at the sky. Above the sky, 200,000 long swords circled around his sword finger. They turned into a storm of sword chi that swept across the world. This was the legendary 10,000 sword salute. They saluted Feng Manlu. This scene caused everyone to inhale a mouthful of cold air. The scene of Yi Guqin breaking through the union of man and sword at the top of the Forbidden City was deeply engraved in many people's hearts. However, at this moment, Feng Manlu pointed at the sky and the 10,000 sword salute. This scene was even more shocking than when Yi Guqin controlled the 10,000 swords to break through the sky. Gosh, this is the miracle of swords. What am I seeing? Is it really the 10,000 sword salute? All the martial artists' hearts contracted uncontrollably. Some sword cultivators were about to kneel down before Feng Manlu as if they were worshipping the sword god. The swords within their origin rings were summoned as they converged within the sword aura storm in the sky. This, could it be? Even the 3 false saints who were keeping the chaotic world demonic ape in check had a rare look of surprise on their faces. It's the union of man and heaven. Elder Xing Gu's eyes showed a rare trace of seriousness. This is the union of man and heaven. Concubine Leng and the other venerables were also shocked by the scene before them. It could be imagined that with their strength and status, being able to reveal such shock, one could imagine the horror in their hearts. This is the union of man and heaven. Looking at Feng Manlu, who was in the center of the 10,000 swords salute, Ye Guchen was shocked. Feng Manlu had pushed himself to the limit and finally stepped into the union of man and heaven. At this moment, he was the Emperor of Swords, the God of Swords. A terrifying sword concept that resonated with the heavens and the earth covered the universe and the firmament. This was the legendary third level of the sword truth, the union of man and heaven. If 1 out of 1,000,000 martial artists could comprehend the sword heart illumination, then, out of 1,000,000 sword hearts illumination, only one could comprehend the union of man and sword. However, out of 1,000,000 sword hearts illumination, there might not be one who could comprehend the union of man and heaven. This level was too difficult. Monstrous talent, comprehension ability, and fortuitous encounters were all indispensable. Even a false saint like Elder Xinggu had not comprehended the unity of heaven and man. But now, the millions of martial artists present witnessed this with their own eyes. Feng Manlu, who was at the 7th heavenly layer of the divine dwelling realm and was only at the half-step venerable realm when using a secret technique, had used the unity of heaven and man. One could imagine how shocked he was. At this moment, Feng Manlu's flesh and blood were on the verge of disintegrating. He was unable to withstand the boundless sword intent. Feng Manlu had been in seclusion for 10 years. Although he had reached the pinnacle of one with the sword and had seen through the profundity of one with the world, he was still unable to comprehend it. However, his cultivation base was not high enough to unleash the unity of heaven and man realm. Even after using the blood sacrifice secret technique to raise his strength to the half-martial highness realm, it was still difficult for him to use it. Thus, Feng Manlu had used his own life as the price to unleash his final sword strike. His skin began to crack, and his tendons and bones were crushed inch by inch. Master! Ye Guchen stared at the scene before him, engraving it deeply in his heart. Wind God, my dearest kin, accompany me as I unleash my final sword strike. Feng Manlu did not care about his own life at all, and the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. A long azure sword broke through the air from his body. It was the divine wind sword. At this moment, the divine wind sword was letting out a sorrowful cry, and the trembling sound of the sword tip reverberated between heaven and earth. It was as if it was grieving for its master. Overlooking the universe and shaking the universe, 10,000 swords to break the universe. Sky sword. One and only. Feng Manlu pointed his sword at the sky. As soon as his voice fell, 200,000 swords in the sky gathered together with the divine wind sword as the core. In the end, they turned into a giant sword that was thousands of feet long, and the sword chi emitted from it reached the 9 heavens. It carried the power of resonance between heaven and earth, and swept toward Leng Fei and the other venerables. The ultimate sword strike that was unleashed with the unity of heaven and man realm, it was, Sky Sword, one and only. Kill! Feng Manlu spat out a voice that shook the heavens and earth. He pointed his sword finger at Leng Fei and the other venerables. The giant sword that was thousands of feet long swept out. Damn it! Leng Fei and the other venerables' faces changed abruptly. They did not take Feng Manlu's strength seriously. However, at this moment, Feng Manlu was not only using his own strength, but he was also borrowing the power of heaven and earth. The so-called unity of heaven and man realm meant that the sword cultivator resonated with heaven and earth. When the sword was unleashed, it could activate the power of heaven and earth, and its power was thousands of times stronger than the cultivator's own strength. Feng Manlu's realm could not measure the power of this sword strike at all. 10 Desolation Freeze. Great Blazing Divine Palm. Galaxy Sword Technique. Leng Fei and the other venerables roared crazily and unleashed their moves together. In the face of this ultimate move, not to mention them, even a false sage would have to be cautious. The giant sword that was thousands of feet long was formed by the swords of over 200,000 sword cultivators. In addition to the power of heaven and earth, how terrifying! How powerful! How shocking! The wind blew smoke for thousands of miles, and the sword was unleashed from the 9 heavens. The sword swept out, splitting the clouds in the sky and cracking the earth. Boom! Unparalleled sword chi swept out in all directions. The desolate earth collapsed, and thousands of cracks spread out. The power of this sword strike changed the color of heaven and earth. It was earth-shattering. Ah! Some venerables roared angrily in the endless sword chi, as if they were being sliced by thousands of swords. After the giant sword hit Leng Fei and the others, it broke apart and turned back into 200,000 long swords, sweeping out. One could imagine that if someone was in the middle of it, they would definitely die miserably, as if they were being sliced by thousands of swords. The millions of cultivators present all closed their eyes because the fluctuation was too intense. The sword light was too dazzling. In the end, in the explosion of the sword chi and the roars of the venerables, the power of this sword strike finally dissipated slowly. The 200,000 flying swords buzzed and trembled, exploding in all directions and flying back to their respective masters. However, at this moment, none of the sword cultivators paid attention to their flying swords. Their gazes were all looking at the 10 great exalted. The only move of the sky sword was so powerful. Would those powerful venerables be able to withstand it? Not only the bystanders, but even Elder Xing Gu and the other 2 false saints frowned slightly as they looked at the center of the violent collision. Even false saint experts like them frowned slightly when they felt the fluctuation of the only move of the sky sword. The power of this sword strike has probably surpassed the peak of the emperor-level sword art. Dongfang Aoyang also frowned as he watched. Master, Ye Guchen was also paying attention. Even in the eyes of Ye Guchen's sword demon, the only move of the sky sword was absolutely powerful. It was almost a perfect ultimate sword strike. However, Ye Guchen was more concerned about the situation in wind-sweeping tower. The earth was split open, and thick smoke and dust shrouded the center of the collision. The dust scattered with the wind, and the scene inside was revealed to everyone's eyes. At this moment, all the spectators held their breaths. Their eyes were frozen with endless shock. Chapter 799. A deep valley appeared on the land. That's right. It wasn't a crack, but a huge valley that was hundreds of feet deep, extending to the end of the sky. Feng Manlu's unique heavenly sword had opened up a valley on the ground. Everyone's gaze swept towards the 10 venerables. Everyone's breathing stopped at this moment. This was because the Venerable One, who originally stood in the sky like 10 mountains, had a majestic aura. Now, only 4 of them were left. A total of 6 venerables had directly disappeared. No. They didn't disappear, because when the wind blew over, there was a strong smell of blood. The 6 venerables had already turned into countless blood foams under the unique heavenly sword and the 200,000 long swords, drifting in the void. Everyone was dumbfounded, their bodies stiff. It was as if endless heavenly thunder rumbled in their minds. It made their minds a little dazed. Feng Manlu only had the strength of the 7th level of the divine dwelling. But he had killed 6 venerables with 1 sword. How terrifying was that? It was simply heaven-defying. This. Even the 3 false saints were dumbfounded. This was especially true for Xing Mo, the Grand Emperor of the Sky Star Dynasty. The 2 supremacies of the Sky Star Dynasty had been obliterated by this sword. Among the remaining 4 venerables, there were 2 venerables. Leng Fei and Xia Lizhan from the Heavenly God's Sword sect were still alive. Granny Chun had been cut by 10,000 swords and turned into blood foams. 2 venerables from the Heavenly Star Dynasty were completely annihilated. 2 venerables from the Dongfang family's side branch and a 4th-level venerable survived. 3 venerables from the Starry Sword Pavilion, and only 1 5th-level venerable survived. But even among the 4 venerables who survived, apart from Leng Fei who was slightly better, the other 3 venerables were covered with countless sword wounds. Their flesh and blood were churning as if they had been put into a meat grinder. At this moment, the three venerables' eyes were filled with unprecedented fear. Their arrogance and indifference as venerables had completely disappeared, and only endless fear was left. Even Ling Fei, who was at the 7th level venerables, still had a trace of fear on her face. Out of the 10 venerables, 6 were killed, 3 were seriously injured, and 1 was injured. What kind of battle record was this? Not to mention that this battle record was created by Feng Manlu, who was only at the 7th layer of the divine dwelling stage. At this moment, millions of martial artists felt their scalps go numb and their hearts tremble. This kind of battle record, this kind of strength, even in the entire South Horizon region, there was no one like him. It could be said that Wind-Sweeping Tower had become a true sword cultivator legend. Although I can also reach the unity of heaven and man realm in the future, it is indeed powerful. Even the arrogant Di Haotian sighed softly when he saw Feng Manlu's unique sky sword. At this moment, everyone's gazes turned towards Feng Manlu. At this moment, Feng Manlu had already fallen from the sky and landed on the ground. He held the cracked divine wind sword with both hands and stood there quietly. His entire body was covered in blood, as if he had been soaked in it. His head was lowered, and his black hair was stained with blood. Blood dripped from the tip of his nose. Feng Manlu stood there quietly, leaning on his sword like a statue. His life aura was nearly extinguished. "Master," Yi Guchen's eyes trembled as he shouted. "Uncle Feng Manlu. Lord Feng Manlu." Yan Changge, Yan Wushuang, and all the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest cried out in grief. However, Feng Manlu just lowered his head and did not say a word. It was as if he was dead. Dead. At this moment, many martial artists looked at each other. After the proud and unyielding lightless sword monarch had displayed such a stunning sword move, he had been defeated. In the end, he had died. Even so, Feng Manlu was still standing as if he was alive. He would rather die than fall to the ground. At this moment, all the sword cultivators lowered their heads slightly to show respect to the sword monarch. Even those who were not sword cultivators were in awe of him. "Damn it, how dare you kill the honorables of the Heavenly Star Dynasty! I will make sure you die without a complete corpse." The eyes of the Heavenly Star Dynasty's Grand Emperor, Xing Mo, darkened. Every honorable was extremely rare, and Feng Manlu's sword had killed 2 honorables of the Heavenly Star Dynasty. How could Xing Mo not be angry? He pressed his palm down, and his true qi turned into a huge handprint that pressed down on Feng Manlu. Even if Feng Manlu was dead, Xing Mo would make sure that he died without a complete corpse and turn him into a meat patty. "Old man, how dare you!" Yi Guchen let out a long howl. The depleted genuine energy in his body surged again. He stood between Feng Manlu and the genuine energy handprint. Feng Manlu's aura was almost gone, but Yi Guchen would not let Feng Manlu's body be destroyed by Xing Mo. The surrounding sword cultivators also clenched their fists. This was blasphemy to Feng Manlu. "No." Su Jianxue was shocked, and her face turned pale. "Good, since you want to die so much, I will let you die together." Xing Mo's eyes were cold as he slammed his palm down. This was not the palm of an honorable, but the palm of a pseudo-saint. No one could block it. Is this pair of master and disciple going to die like this? Everyone stared. Today, Feng Manlu and Yi Guchen had thoroughly shaken the hearts of everyone present. It was hard to imagine how powerful this pair of master and disciple would become in the future if they could survive. But unfortunately, heaven was jealous of geniuses. However, at this critical moment, a piercing sword qi suddenly broke through the air and collided with Xing Mo's handprint. With a loud explosion, true qi rippled in all directions. Xing Mo's palm was actually scattered. "Who is it?" Xing Mo's eyes narrowed. Elder Xing Gu and Dongfang Aoyang also narrowed their eyes. This sudden turn of events caught everyone off guard. There was actually a mysterious expert who blocked Xing Mo's attack. Everyone stared. A black-clothed middle-aged man appeared in the sky. His gray-white hair fluttered in the wind, and he held a sword in his arms. His aura was as cold as frost, and there were 2 crisscrossing scars on his face. He looked cold and arrogant. Everywhere it passed, sword chi shot into the sky like frost, causing space to distort. His aura was not weaker than that of Elder Xinggu, Xing Mo, and Dongfang Aoyang. It was another pseudo-saint expert. Heavens, another pseudo-saint. Who is this? Is he here to help Yiguchen? Everyone was in an uproar. However, that was not all. 2 more figures appeared in 2 other parts of the void. One was a beautiful woman in a red palace dress, and she always had a smile on her face. The other was a middle-aged man in a golden robe, and his aura was thick and heavy. Although their auras had not reached the level of a pseudo-saint like the black-clothed swordsman, they were about the same level as Leng Fei. They had reached the 7th level of the honorable realm. The black-clothed swordsman, the beautiful woman in the palace dress, and the man in the golden robe had suddenly appeared. It was a pseudo-saint expert and 2 7th-level honorables. This caused everyone to be stunned. Chapter 800. Honorables were rare, and 7th heaven honorables were even rarer. As for false saints, they were even rarer. However, at this moment, a false saint and 2 7th heavenly layer venerables had suddenly appeared. How could they not be shocked and surprised? You are. Xing Mo frowned slightly. The black-robed swordsman could break his attack with 1 sword, so he was obviously not weaker than him. But Xing Mo did not remember provoking such an opponent. I'll protect this person. The black-robed swordsman's expression was cold. He held his sword and didn't say much. He looked at Yiguchen. This false saint expert wants to protect Yiguchen. All the spectating cultivators were shocked, and their hearts were filled with shock. Since when did Yiguchen know a false saint expert? Even Yiguchen looked at the black-robed swordsman in surprise. He had never seen this person before, let alone be friends with him. Moreover, with his strength as a false saint, it was impossible for him to have any relationship with Yiguchen, who was at the life and death realm. When did the solitary cloud sword saint, Ling Qianhen, who's always been alone, have a relationship with an ant like this? Elder Xinggu glanced deeply at the black-robed swordsman, and he spoke with an indifferent tone. What? Solitary cloud sword saint. He's the famous rogue swordsman who cultivated alone and became a false saint expert. He's called the solitary cloud sword saint. Cries of surprise rang out one after another. He's the solitary cloud sword saint Ling Qianhen? The Sword Dao Alliance had invited him before, but he's too cold and arrogant. He's always alone and disdains to join the Sword Dao Alliance. Kenpo was also slightly surprised as he looked at Ling Qianhen. The Sword Dynasty was a country of sword cultivators in the South Sky region. There were many sword cultivators in the Sword Dao Alliance. Ling Qianhen was also one of the people the Sword Dao Alliance wanted to invite to join. Unfortunately, Ling Qianhen disdained to join them and would rather cultivate alone. In the South Horizon region, although most of the experts were concentrated in the overlord forces or the top dynasties. However, there were also a small number of rogue cultivators who cultivated alone. Among them, there was no lack of people who had great opportunities and had great achievements. There were even some who had become saints through independent cultivators. This solitary cloud sword saint, Ling Qianhen, was a rogue false saint sword artist. And you, Red Cloud House Master, could it be that you also want to protect this evil creature like Ling Qianhen? Elder Xinggu turned to look at the beautiful woman in palace attire. The beautiful woman in the palace dress smiled. What about you, Huangfu Dingtao? Are you one of them too? Elder Xinggu frowned and asked in a dignified manner. The golden-robed middle-aged man nodded. Gosh, those two are Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao. They are also 2 very famous rogue cultivators. What is going on? The 3 of them actually appeared together to protect Yiguchen. As Elder Xinggu exposed their identities, waves of exclamations sounded out from the surrounding crowd. because the three of them were very famous among rogue cultivators. They were famous in the South Sky region. However, today, they came to protect Yiguchen. This was puzzling. Even if Ling Qianhen was a swordsman, he might be related to Yiguchen. However, Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao were not sword cultivators at all. They had nothing to do with Yiguchen and the others. Everyone was extremely puzzled. What is going on? Yiguchen was also confused. Silly kid, when did you know so many experts? Su Jianshi felt like she had just survived a disaster. Humph, do you really want to protect this person? He has offended Starry Sword Pavilion, Heavenly God Sword Sect, and my Dongfang family. If you want to interfere, you should think twice. Dongfang Aoyang snorted. The three heard him. Ling Qianhen did not have any expression. He was as cold as ever. Huangfu Dingtao and Red Cloud House Master's faces slightly changed. Ling Qianhen's strength had reached False Saint. Even if he had slightly offended Overlord forces, they would not push him too far. After all, False Saints were still very powerful. However, the two of them were only at the 7th layer of the Venerable Realm. Although they were already very strong, they were not enough to make Overlord forces hesitate. We were entrusted by others to do what we were asked to do. He's just a kid in life and death realm. So what if we let him go? Huangfu Dingtao's tone softened slightly. Then I must kill him. Do you dare to stop me? Grand Emperor Xing Imo said with a cold face. He hated Yiguchen to the bone. A powerful false saint aura swept out. Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao were both pushed back. Their faces were somewhat ugly, and they could not help but turn towards Ling Qianhen. Humph. You can try. Ling Qianhen snorted coldly. His body emitted a cold sword qi that seemed to freeze the void. Ling Qianhen, your frost sword Dao is getting more and more refined. Elder Xinggu waved his sleeve, and that frosty sword qi dissipated. Entrusted by others to do what they were asked to do. Who is it that can ask the three of you to help? Dongfang Aoyang said with a doubtful look. He was not afraid of Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao. However, Ling Qianhen was famous for his cold personality. Moreover, he was a man of his word. With such a false saint in the sword Dao, it would be troublesome for Elder Xinggu and the other two to deal with Yiguchen. Ha! It's been so long. Sure enough, everyone has forgotten about me. At this moment, an old and hoarse voice sounded in the distant sky again. Hearing this voice, Yiguchen's face suddenly froze, revealing a trace of surprise. Everyone's gazes converged at the same time, with some interest in their eyes. After all, in such a clash of experts, the one who would appear must be an expert like Ling Qianhen. However, to everyone's surprise, the one who appeared was an old man with white hair and beard. He reeked of alcohol and was holding a wine gourd. Who is this? Everyone was stunned as if they had seen a ghost. Although this old man's aura had also reached the Venerable Realm, it was not particularly powerful. He was about the 1st or 2nd level, far inferior to Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao. Old drunkard. Yiguchen said in a low voice. This old man was the old drunkard who he had not seen for a long time. Boy, we meet again. The old drunkard looked at Yiguchen and smiled. Who is this old man? What's his relationship with Yiguchen? How could he ask the solitary Cloud Sword Saint to help? All the warriors were dumbfounded. If it was just a venerable, then forget it. However, how could a false saint expert be so easily invited? This time, I've troubled the three of you. I sent a message to so many people, but only the three of you came. TSK, the world is so cold. The old drunkard said to Ling Qianhen and the other two and shook his head. My solitary frost sword was forged by you. I owe you a favor. This time, I'll repay it. Ling Qianhen held the solitary frost sword in his arms and said. The other two also nodded slightly. You'll forge Heaven Edge. Elder Xinggu glanced at the old drunkard and frowned after thinking for a moment. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and his face changed abruptly. What, Forge Heaven Edge? Could it be that Forge Heaven Edge? Xing Mo was also stunned. Dongfang Aoyang's expression also froze. When the warriors present heard the three words Forge Heaven Edge, their faces froze at the same time. Then, their eyes widened and countless eyes stared at the old drunkard. He's the 8-star forging grandmaster, the famous southern forging saint, Forge Heaven Edge. Chapter 801. Speaking of the South Horizon region's blacksmithing industry, there were two people that couldn't be ignored. Southern forging saint, Forging Tianfeng. Beiyan Smith Emperor, Master Shao. Back then, these two people, one from the south and one from the north, had superb forging skills and were famous throughout the South Horizon region. Later on, both of them became 8-star blacksmiths and their reputations reached the peak. An 8-star Grandmaster forging master was able to use a lot of energy. This was because every martial artist, no matter how strong or weak they were, needed a suitable divine weapon and protective gear. Even saints had their own needs. Therefore, the higher the level of a blacksmith, the more popular they were. There were even many supremacies, false saints, and even saints who lowered their status and asked for help from blacksmiths in order to get a suitable weapon. It was also because of this that there was a saying in the South Horizon region. He would rather offend a saint than an 8-star Grandmaster Artificer. This was because if you offended an 8-star blacksmith, he would call a group of saints to beat you up. No one could have imagined that the old man who had suddenly appeared was actually the southern forging saint who had concealed his identity for a long time, Forging Tianfeng. It's really Forging Tianfeng. No wonder he could invite Sword Saint Gu Yun and the others. After all, he's an 8-star blacksmith. However, Mo Tianfeng seems to have crippled his own hands after losing to Master Shao. I'm afraid he won't be able to return to the way he was in the past. What does Mo Tianfeng have to do with Yi Guchen? Forging Tianfeng's arrival undoubtedly caused a huge uproar. After all, the southern forging saint was too famous in the South Horizon region. Even if he had been silent for a long time, his reputation still hadn't weakened. The old drunkard is actually the southern forging saint, Forging Tianfeng? Yi Guchen was also a little surprised. Although Yi Guchen knew that the old drunkard's identity was probably a little extraordinary, it was difficult to connect the old drunkard who loved drinking and stank of alcohol with the famous southern forging saint in the South Horizon region. Forging Tianfeng, what does this kid have to do with you? Why are you obstructing him? Elder Xinggu's tone was slightly heavy as he spoke. Although Forging Tianfeng's hands were crippled and was no longer the same as before, it was still somewhat terrifying. Moreover, Sword Saint Guyun and the others were there as well. This kid is considered half a disciple of mine, and he has inherited my forging skills. Do you think I should save him? Duan Tianfeng took a sip from his gourd and said. Although he and Yi Guchen had never formally acknowledged each other as master and disciple, they had never addressed each other as master and disciple. Even so, almost all of Mo Tianfeng's smithing art was passed on to Yi Guchen. Even the taboo forging technique, which allowed one to forge a sword with a human soul and cultivate both sword and life, had been passed on to Yi Guchen. To a certain extent, Yi Guchen could be considered half a disciple of Mo Tianfeng. What? Yi Guchen is actually the disciple of the southern forging saint. A single stone raised 1,000 ripples, causing an uproar in all directions. This was an 8-star Grandmaster blacksmith, a saint blacksmith. Back then, many people wanted to take him as their master. Among them, there was no lack of peerless geniuses from overlord-level forces. However, Mo Tianfeng was disdainful. No one expected that he would choose a low-level dynasty's prodigy to inherit his forging skills. That's right, no wonder Yi Guchen is proficient in the art of smithing and even defeated Duanmu Yu from the Duanmu family of the Heavenly Star dynasty. It turns out that he has inherited the southern forging saint's technique. Some people suddenly thought of this. Southern forging saint. Heavens, little friend Yi is actually the disciple of the southern forging saint. No wonder he has such a master's letter. It seems like that letter is from the Southern Forging Saint. In the dense crowd, the people from the Gongsun family were also present. Gongsun Yu was trembling with excitement. The letter that Yi Guqin had given him actually belonged to the Southern Forging Saint. So that's how it is. Gongsun Xiaoya's little face was also stunned, and her little mouth was wide open. She finally knew why Yi Guqin was so amazing in the art of smithing. So that's how it is. The people from the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest were also amazed. Yi Guqin could always shock them again and again. Southern Forging Saint. How is this possible? Duanmu Yu, who had been defeated by Yi Guqin in the art of smithing, was a little dumbfounded at this moment. Even his lips were trembling. No wonder he lost to Yi Guqin. Duanmu Yu was only lucky enough to receive a little guidance from Master Shao. However, Yi Guqin was Mo Tianfeng's disciple. Comparing the two, it would be strange if he could win. It's not wrong to lose to him. Duanmu Yu even felt lucky now that he had the luck to compete with the disciple of the Southern Forging Saint. The faces of Elder Xing Gu and the other pseudo-saints also sank. They did not expect that there was such a relationship between Yi Guqin and Mo Tianfeng. It seemed that Mo Tianfeng would not let this matter go easily today. Mo Tianfeng, even if he's your disciple, he'll definitely die today for provoking our forces. Elder Xing Gu said in a deep voice. That's right, Mo Tianfeng. You're no longer the same as before. Your hands are crippled, and you're no longer an 8-star Grandmaster blacksmith. Since Master Shao forced you to live in seclusion back then, you can rest assured and live in seclusion, Xing Mo said coldly. If Mo Tianfeng was at his peak, they would not dare to push him too far. However, the current Mo Tianfeng was no longer the same as before, so there was no need to be too afraid. Mo Tianfeng's drunken face also sank slightly. Indeed. Mo Tianfeng had helped many people in the past, and many experts owed him a favor. However, when he sent the message previously, most of them rejected it. No one was willing to offend the Starry Sword Pavilion, Dongfang family, and other overlord forces for a half-crippled Mo Tianfeng. In the end, only Ling Qianhen and the other two came to repay the favor. This was because the three of them were rogue cultivators and did not have any forces or families, so they were not afraid of the revenge of the overlord forces. So, you're determined to kill my disciple? Mo Tianfeng's drunken eyes flashed coldly. Attack! Elder Xing Gu and the others did not delay any longer. After taking care of Yi Guqin, they still had to explore the secrets of the fleshly demon fetus, so they did not have time to waste here. Leng Fei and the other 4 sovereigns attacked at the same time. Thank you, Mo Tianfeng said. Sigh. The Red Cloud Chamber Master and Huangfu Dingtao sighed slightly, but they still attacked. They fought with Leng Fei and the other 4 sovereigns. Although there were 4 sovereigns on Leng Fei's side, only she was a 7th heaven sovereign. The other 3 were severely injured, so the Red Cloud Chamber Master and Huangfu Dingtao were enough to stop them. Of course, they only stopped them. They did not dare to attack. If they killed Leng Fei and the others, they would completely offend the Starry Sword Pavilion and the Heavenly God Sword Sect. You suppress the chaotic world demonic ape for now. The 2 of us will attack, Elder Xing Gu said. Dongfang Aoyang nodded slightly and continued to suppress the rampaging chaotic world demonic ape. As for Elder Xing Gu and Xing Mo, the 2 of them, they freed up their hands. Mo Tianfeng's old face was also a little solemn. He turned his head and said, Sword Saint Guyun, thank you. I, Ling Qianhen, do not like to owe others favors. After this attack, the favor will be written off, Ling Qianhen said coldly. The old drunkard nodded slightly. Boom. Elder Xing Gu reached out his hand and attacked Yi Guqin. With his strength as a false saint, it was really embarrassing for him to fight against Yi Guqin. Whoosh! However, a cold sword chi broke through the air, causing the void to be filled with frost, and blocked Elder Xing Gu with a loud bang. Ling Qianhen, do you really want to become enemies with the Starry Sword Pavilion? Elder Xinggu shouted angrily. No one can threaten me, Ling Qianhen, and the Starry Sword Pavilion is no exception. Chapter 802. Ling Qianhen's long gray hair fluttered in the wind. The sword chi around his body was as cold as ice, giving people a feeling of falling into an ice cave. Hearing Ling Qianhen's words, Elder Xinggu's face was as gloomy as water. In the entire South Horizon region, how many people could ignore the majesty of the Starry Sword Pavilion? However, Ling Qianhen was a rogue cultivator who came and went without a trace, plus he had the strength of a false saint. If the Starry Sword Pavilion did not send a saint to deal with him, there really were not many people who could suppress Ling Qianhen. However, the saints of the Starry Sword Pavilion would not casually make a move because of such a matter, and most of the saints were conceited and would not chase after a false saint. Therefore, Ling Qianhen did not have to be too afraid of the Starry Sword Pavilion. Boom! In the void, there were layers of fluctuations. The battle between false saints, even though it was not as intense as the saints who could easily destroy the void, but the fluctuations were very violent, and the sky trembled like a drum. This is really a shocking battle. The surrounding millions of martial artists all retreated to the distance. Looking at the shocking battle between the honorable and false saint, everyone widened their eyes, fearing that they would miss the slightest detail. This kind of battle was really rare in the South Horizon region. No one can save this little bastard today. Xing Yimou stretched out his hand and grabbed at Yi Guqin. Seeing this, Ling Qianhen's eyes flashed with a cold light. The lonely frost sword in his arms shook, and a sword light cut through the void and swept towards Xing Yimou. However, with a loud bang, Elder Xinggu raised his hand and formed a seal, bombarding the sword light. Ha! Ling Qianhen, although your strength isn't bad, isn't it a little too whimsical to think that you can fight two false saints by yourself? Elder Xinggu sneered. Ling Qianhen frowned slightly. Little bastard, die. When Xing Yimou saw this, he continued to reach out with his hand. The space around Yi Guqin began to tremble, and an intense pressure made him feel as if he was being crushed by an ancient mountain. Su Jianshi and the others did the same. How dare you! Mo Tianfeng roared and dashed over in a flash. However, he had crippled his own hands in the past. Coupled with the years of drinking and wasting away, his strength had decreased greatly. Moreover, blacksmiths usually focused on the path of forging and did not have an advantage in martial arts. I allowed you to act so impudently because you were once a southern forging saint. However, today, this little bastard must die. Xing Yimou swept out a hand, directly forcing Heaven Forging Feng back as blood spurted from his mouth. Senior Duan, forget it. Let this Yi Guqin take responsibility for today's matter. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. You have some backbone, but you still have to die. Xing Yimou attacked again. This time, there was really no one who could save Yi Guqin. Chaotic World Demonic Ape, Feng Manlu, Forging Tianfeng. Everyone who could make a move had already made a move. All of their trump cards had been revealed. Unfortunately, Yi Guqin's enemies were too many and too strong. For Yi Guqin, who was only at the life and death threshold, overlord forces were unshakable behemoths. In the end, he still has to die. Looking at Yi Guqin, all the cultivators present lamented in their hearts. They had to admit that they had witnessed an absolutely shocking battle today. And the source of this battle was Yi Guqin, a life and death threshold cultivator. If Yi Guqin didn't die today, his fame in the South Horizon region would be comparable to the 10 great young masters. Unfortunately, many warriors shook their heads. But just as everyone was about to witness Yi Guqin's fall, a delicate sobbing voice resounded in all directions. You're all bad people, big bad people. Shua, or won't allow you to hurt Brother Yi and Sister Su. A slender and petite figure suddenly broke free from Ji Ling and the others' hands and charged towards the center of the battlefield. Don't, Shua, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others turned pale with fright. Shua had followed Su Jianshi and the others to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. With her charming appearance, she had become everyone's favorite. All the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest liked this cute girl. But at this moment, even Yen Chang'e and the others were helpless in a battle of this level. They couldn't intervene and change anything. Wouldn't Shui be courting death? However, Shui's speed was unexpectedly fast. Her figure turned into a series of afterimages. A strange scarlet color seeped out from her pair of large, lustrous eyes. Xing Mo had also noticed Shui. But when he saw that it was just a girl in her teens, his face returned to its usual indifference. So many people want to die with you. Little bastard, you can die in peace. Xing Mo's expression was cold. Even though Shui was just a little girl, he had no intention of holding back. In his opinion, his grandson, Xinghong Crown Prince, was dead. Ye Guqin and everyone related to him would die with Xinghong Crown Prince. Boom! Xing Mo clenched his hand. Void true energy tumbled and condensed into a crystalline palm print. It grabbed Ye Guqin, Su Jianshi, the little fatty, the divine eagle, and Shui. Clearly, Xing Mo wanted to kill them all. After a loud explosion, the atmosphere fell silent. Even the false saints and venerables who were fighting against each other temporarily separated. If Ye Guqin died, it would be meaningless for them to continue fighting. Is he dead? Everyone stared at the place where the smoke and dust had filled the air with rapt attention. Some even swallowed their saliva. After all, Ye Guqin, a mere life-and-death chamber martial artist, had brought them too many surprises today. He's finally dead. The innate sword embryo should be returned to its rightful owner. Gu Xiaoyang sneered. Yi Cangyue's eyes were calm. Ye Guqin had died, so Gu Xiaoyang naturally became the sole owner of the innate sword embryo. This. Kenpo, Princess Feng Shi, and the others were also stunned. They sighed in their hearts. All the disciples in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest felt as if they were struck by 100,000 lightning bolts. Yan Wushuang stood there in a daze as if she had lost her soul. Her beautiful eyes became hollow. Damn it! You! The drunkenness in Duan Tianfeng's eyes disappeared and was replaced by extreme anger. He had finally found a disciple who could inherit the forbidden art, but the disciple died just like that. Hu. Ling Qianhen, you all merely came for nothing today, Elder Ancient Star said with a laugh. Ling Qianhen was indifferent. He had already blocked a pseudo-saint and completed his mission. However, as a Sword Dao pseudo-saint, Ling Qianhen could feel that Ye Guqin was an extremely monstrous Sword Dao genius. It was a pity that he died just like that. In addition, Feng Manlu, whose aura was almost dead, was still standing with his sword. Although Ling Qianhen was late and did not see the unique sky sword, he could still feel the remnant sword intent. If this person doesn't die, I will have one more opponent to spar with in the future. Ling Qianhen lightly shook his head. This pair of master and disciple were both monstrous Sword Dao geniuses. Unfortunately, they died on the same day. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a voice suddenly rang out. Cracks had appeared in the sky at some point in time. It was as if many pitch-black eyes had opened. Strands of scarlet blood dripped down from the cracks. It was like a rain of blood. The heavens opened their eyes and shed tears of blood. It was called Heaven's Cry. Chapter 803. What's going on? Just when everyone thought that Ye Guqin and the others had died at Xing Mo's hands, some people inadvertently raised their heads and suddenly saw many cracks in the sky. Countless scarlet blood flowed down from the pitch-black cracks in space. It looked like countless pairs of pitch-black eyes were shedding tears of blood. Even Elder Xing Gu and the others' eyes narrowed. They sensed something very bad. The heavens were weeping blood. Rumble. The crystal palm that was suppressing Ye Guqin and the others suddenly began to tremble. Xing Mo's old face slightly froze. What's going on? Everyone else was also surprised. As a pseudo-saint expert, Xing Mo could kill a supremacy even if he just casually pressed down with his palm, let alone Yiguchen and the others. But now, under everyone's gaze, the crystal palm violently trembled and cracks spread. Then, waves of terrifying sword chi spread out. That sword chi contained both the bloodthirsty Azura intent and the intent of Nirvana extermination. Sword Dao. As a pseudo-saint swordsman, Ling Qianhen was naturally very sensitive to sword intent and sword Dao. At this moment, he sensed a terrifying sword domain from the crystalline handprint. Boom! After a few breaths, the crystal palm suddenly exploded. With a loud bang, an endless sea of blood overturned. That's the sword domain of the Azura sword Dao. Could it be Yiguchen? No, I feel that the sword domain is even stronger than Yiguchen's. When they saw the blood-colored sword intent spread out, countless people exclaimed. Because it was the sword domain of the Azura sword Dao, the Azura blood sea. But, that was not all. A pitch-black and destructive sword domain superimposed and exploded at the same time, completely destroying the crystal handprint. Everywhere the sword domain passed, all things fell into a deathly silence, plants withered, and all life was extinguished. That's the lifeless sword principle. Ling Qianhen's eyes flashed. The Azura sword Dao and the lifeless sword Dao were both extremely deadly Daos. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, a peerlessly beautiful figure that could captivate all living beings appeared. Her silvery white hair fluttered in the air like snow, flowing with luster. Her peerless face was as cold as a sculpture. It was so white that it was slightly translucent, but it was flawless. Coupled with her long and narrow blood-red eyes, she looked strangely beautiful. Her snow-white dress accentuated her graceful and perfect devilish curves, making people unable to take their eyes off her. At this moment, this peerless woman who had appeared out of nowhere was stepping on the void with her bare feet. Her silver hair danced in the wind, and her silk dress fluttered in the wind. She was cold and beautiful, and her style was peerless. This. Could it be the silver-haired little girl from before? Everyone was stunned. They were dumbfounded. Many martial artists' eyes were filled with amazement. Such a stunning woman was rare in the South Horizon region. This is the Heaven's Whale phenomenon. Elder Xinggu, Dongfang Aoyang, and the others exclaimed when they saw the phenomenon in the sky. The Heaven's Whale phenomenon represented great misfortune, great sin, and great terror. It was a type of curse. Of course, if someone with such a phenomenon fully awakened, their strength would be terrifying. Di Haotian, who was standing in the sky, suddenly had a flash of light in his silver eyes. Coldness flashed through his eyes. He was also someone with a phenomenon. Flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses bloomed from the ground, and dragons roared. This was also the meaning of Di Haotian's self-proclaimed destiny, the true dragon of Haotian. However, the Heaven's Whale phenomenon made the heavens cry. It was an ominous curse that countered Di Haotian. One was blessed by the heavens, while the other made the heavens cry. Shua Yi Guchen, Su Jianshi, and the others were still alive behind this peerless woman. Hearing Yi Guchen's words, the silver-haired woman turned her head slightly. Her blood-red eyes seemed to contain a sea of blood. Confusion appeared in her cold eyes, as if she didn't know why she had to protect Yi Guchen. It was like an instinct. However, she still turned her head and looked at Xing Mo and the others coldly. This is the Heaven's Whale phenomenon. She's an ominous demoness that will bring disaster. As expected, the people around this vile creature are also sinners. Xing Mo's face was cold. Someone with the Heaven's Whale phenomenon had appeared in the Nantian region and caused a massacre. I didn't expect to see the Heaven's Whale phenomenon. This demoness is ominous and must be killed. Elder Xinggu also spoke. Even Ling Qianhen, the Red Cloud Chamber Master, and the others frowned. Those with the Heaven's Whale phenomenon would be condemned by the masses and would be immersed in bloodshed for their entire lives. This meant that Shua would be the enemy of everyone. The surrounding million cultivators all looked at Shua, with extreme fear and terror. It was as if they were looking at a monster. The fear in their eyes was even greater than when they saw the chaotic world demonic ape. How is this possible? Why did Shui become like this? In the Sword Sect's forest of towers, Ji Ling and the others were in disbelief. Still, exposed. Yi Guqian clenched his fists tightly. Shui's identity as the Heaven's Whale Demoness was too sensitive. However, in order to save him, Shui had completely exposed her identity. From now on, there would be no way for Shui to survive in this vast world. Kill. Without any hesitation, Elder Xinggu directly attacked. His hand seal pressed down. Lifeless sword Dao, heaven and earth extermination. Shui's voice was cold and indifferent. She raised her jade-like slender hand and endless black sword Qi surged out with a terrifying aura. However, her opponent was a false saint. Boom! A loud explosion sounded and Shui was directly pushed back. Blood flowed out of her 7 orifices. After Shui awakened, although the Heaven's Whale phenomenon was powerful, it was obviously not enough for her to fight against a false saint. Elder Xinggu's casual palm strike had severely injured Shui. Shui, that's enough. Yi Guqian said. He would not let anyone die for him again. However, at this moment, the Heaven's Whale phenomenon in the sky seemed to have triggered a change in the flesh demon fetus. The vast flesh demon fetus, which was like an island of flesh and blood, began to wriggle violently. Then, under everyone's shocked gaze, Shui's figure rose into the sky. Although her 7 orifices were bleeding, the flesh demon fetus released endless flesh essence that gathered into a blood-red river and poured into Shui's body. Shui's aura also skyrocketed. Not good, stop her quickly. She might be able to use the power of the flesh demon fetus to completely awaken. Elder Xinggu could not help but exclaim when he saw this scene. The current Shui was only in the initial stages of awakening. She had not fully awakened. However, if she used the power of the flesh demon fetus, she might really be able to fully awaken. At that time, even Elder Xinggu and the others were not confident that they could completely kill her. Kill. Elder Xinggu raised his hand again. Endless true qi gathered and condensed into a sword of stars. This was not a casual suppression like before. Instead, he used a divine ability. If a false saint powerhouse really attacked, how powerful would his power be? Shui. Yi Guqian's expression changed abruptly. Even if Shui was in a special state now, she would definitely not be able to block Elder Xinggu's attack. At this moment, a wisp of melodious flute music drifted over. The flute music contained a desolate and sorrowful mood that caused people to be involuntarily immersed in it. However, the flute music was like thunder in the ears of the 3 false saints. Sword intent. Ling Qianhen's expression changed. Boom! A violent explosion resounded through the sky and earth. The starry sword that Elder Xinggu had transformed into was directly shattered by the sound of the flute. Today, no one can stop Jiru Qianxue from awakening, a faint figure materialized in the void. Chapter 804. It was a middle-aged man in snow-white robes. His robes were whiter than snow. His face was handsome, and his facial features were distinct. However, there was a trace of melancholy between his brows. He held a jade flute in his hand, looking like a melancholy scholar. However, at this moment, no one would think that he was just a scholar who couldn't even trust a chicken. A wisp of flute music was enough to shatter Elder Xinggu's attack. The man who appeared was the master of Bloodthirst House, Shuiqing. He was also a false saint expert. Another false saint. Everyone in the distance sucked in a breath of air. The number of false saints they saw today was more than what they had seen in their entire lives. Moreover, this false saint who suddenly appeared seemed to be standing on Yi Guqian's side. Many people looked at Yi Guqian, and their eyes were filled with deep shock. This little life and death chamber martial artist was able to attract so many experts. It was shocking. You are. Elder Xinggu frowned and looked at Shui Yiqing with an unprecedentedly solemn expression. Although they were both in the false saint realm, the man in snow-white robes in front of him gave him a dangerous feeling. This person could threaten his safety. Xing Mo and Dongfang Aoyang, the two false saints, also stood with Elder Xinggu. As for the chaotic world demonic ape, it had already used up all its energy. Its body shrunk back to Blackie, and it fainted in the divine eagle's claws. A very strong sword cultivator. On the other side, Ling Qianhen held his sword and looked at Shui Yiqing with a solemn expression. Although Shui Yiqing was playing the flute music contained sword Dao. Therefore, Shui Yiqing was a sword cultivator with extraordinary strength. This person, when Shui Yiqing's flute music appeared, Yi Guqin immediately reacted and knew Shui Yiqing's identity. He was the master of Bloodthirst House. This was because when he joined Bloodthirst House, he was almost killed by the broken sword old man. In the end, a wisp of flute music drifted over and made the broken sword old man panic. The sound of the flute was similar to the sound of the flute played by the man in front of him. It also contained sword intent. Who are you? Do you know that the heaven weeping witch is a great inauspicious person, a great sinner? She once created a boundless killing calamity. Do you want that tragedy to repeat itself? Xing Mo coldly snorted and angrily rebuked. The weeping witch was clearly there to protect Yi Guqin. Shui Yiqing, on the other hand, protected heaven weeping witch. In that case, wouldn't it mean that another false saint had stepped forward to protect Yi Guqin? If that was the case, it would undoubtedly be even more difficult for him to kill Yi Guqin. What does the bloodshed of all living beings have to do with me? Shui Yiqing didn't mind at all and smiled. What is the relationship between Shui and the Tower Lord? Is Shui-er's real name Ji Ruqiang's? Why is the Tower Lord grooming Shui-er to awaken heaven's wail? Yi Guqin's mind was filled with questions. Shui Yiqing established the blood listening tower and had her subordinates collect the blood essence of people's hearts to form a blood pool to nourish Shui-er. And now, the blood-flesh devil fetus had appeared and allowed Shui-er to absorb the blood essence and completely awaken. What was the meaning behind this? What was Shui-er's identity? If that's the case, then I'll kill you as well. Elder Xinggu, Xing Mo, and Dongfang Aoyang attacked Shui Yiqing at the same time. Ling Qianhen paused for a moment and didn't make a move. He had only promised Xing Tianfeng to help protect Yi Guqin, but it didn't mean that he would help Shui Yiqing. He. You overlord forces are still as overbearing as ever. Shui Yiqing smiled when she saw this. A hint of coldness flashed in her eyes. She fastened the jade flute to her waist and raised her left hand. A faint sword Dao spread out, bringing with it a deep emotion. She raised her right hand and a pitch-black and deathly still sword Qi spread out. Everywhere it passed, it emitted a boundless killing intent. Left palm of love, right hand of death. As soon as Shui Yiqing's words fell, two sword Dao domains spread out at the same time. This is the sword Dao of love and the sword Dao of death. Ling Qianhen's eyes burst with light. The sword Dao of death and the sword Dao of death were both peerless sword Daos. And the two sword Daos had a feeling of natural suppression. Generally speaking, it was impossible for such diametrically opposite sword Daos to appear on the body of a sword cultivator at the same time because it was too contradictory. But on Shui Yiqing, the sword Dao of love and the sword Dao of death were integrated very well, like the yin and yang of Tai Chi, these two sword Daos. Are you the sword saint of Snow Knight of the Dark World, Shui Yiqing? When Shui Yiqing displayed the two sword Daos, Elder Xinggu's eyes widened and he suddenly opened his mouth. As soon as these words came out, the expressions of some people in the audience immediately became sluggish, and a touch of horror immediately surged up. Dark world. He is actually the false saint of the dark world. Dark world, what is the dark world? Although some people showed panic on their faces when they heard the dark world, most of the martial artists were at a loss. Obviously, they had never heard of this term. Oh, As expected of the Elder of the Star Universe Sword Pavilion, you are experienced and knowledgeable. Shui Yiqing smiled slightly. However, his moves didn't stop. The two-sword Daos in his hands, like the reincarnation of Yin and Yang, collided with Elder Xinggu and the others. The violent collision waves swept across the sky, and Shui Yiqing was shaken back. But Elder Xinggu and the other two were also shaken back. Shui Yiqing was actually able to withstand the attacks of 3 false saints of the same level with his own strength. The sword Dao of the Bloodthirst Tower Master is indeed extraordinary. These two sword Daos can be perfectly integrated in his hands, erupting with power that is several times stronger. Ye Guchen's eyes narrowed as he thought to himself. As early as when he heard the flute sound, Ye Guchen knew that the Bloodthirst Tower Master must be an absolute sword Dao expert. Now that he saw it, it was indeed true. Hateful. Elder Xinggu and the others' faces darkened. Shui Yiqing was a well-known figure in the dark world. In particular, these two sword Daos were integrated into one, making his battle strength far beyond that of an ordinary false saint. Shui Yiqing could not defeat the 3 of them by himself, but it was not a problem for him to contend with them and stall for time. On the other side, Ji-Ru Green Snow was constantly absorbing the flesh and blood essence of the fleshly demon fetus. Gradually, a pair of blood-red wings began to spread behind her. Damn it! Elder Xinggu and the others' faces twitched when they saw this. It was rumored that when the person with the Heaven's Whale vision awakened, blood-red wings would grow behind their back. The more awakened the Heaven's Whale vision, the more wings would be formed. The Heaven's Whale Witch, who had once created endless killing in the South Horizon region, had 8 wings on her back. But it was rumored that the most perfect Heaven's Whale vision was 12 wings. Now that Ji-Ru Green Snow had wings, it meant that she had begun to completely awaken. Then another pair of wings grew, and Ji-Ru Green Snow's aura soared again, turning into a 4-winged witch. Just as Elder Xinggu and the others were enraged. Shui Yiqing's indifferent expression changed slightly. She frowned slightly and looked at the sky. Since when were the people of the Dark World able to walk openly in the South Horizon region? A grand, broad, and boundless voice, like the voice of a god, spread throughout the 9 heavens and 10 earths. The pupils of the million martial artists present shrank to the size of a needle at this moment. Chapter 805. When they heard this voice, everyone's first reaction was to kneel down. It was as if this was a kind of rule, a natural law. This voice seemed to resound in everyone's heart, causing everyone to feel a sense of holiness, supremacy, and transcendence. Above the sky, a dazzling brilliance bloomed, like a blazing sun. And in the blazing sun, a hazy figure vaguely appeared. Even though Zhang Xian was unable to see his figure and appearance clearly, he still gave off an urge to worship him, as if he was a deity. That is, what a powerful aura, like a boundless sea, even more powerful than the aura of a false saint. Many martial artists were shocked, revealing unprecedented shock. It was just a hazy figure, but it gave off a more powerful aura and pressure than a false saint. Everyone thought of a certain possibility in their hearts. There was incomparable shock in each other's eyes. Heavenly Tribulation Saint. These 4 simple words were as heavy as Mount Tai. As the top powerhouse of the South Horizon region, a saint was no longer a human, but an almost godlike existence. The reason why an overlord-level force was called an overlord-level force was because of the existence of a saint. Is that really a saint? Many warriors' hearts beat loudly, looking at the hazy figure wrapped in endless brilliance in the sky. A saint projection, you are the East Flow Sword Saint of the Heavenly God Sword Sect, Wen Dong Lu. Shui Yiqing's expression was slightly serious. In the face of Elder Xinggu and other false saints, he could be calm. But in the face of a saint, even a false saint like Shui Yiqing with such strength behind her would have to pay attention. Heavenly Tribulation Saints, who had passed the Heavenly Tribulation, had infinite power. Even if it was just a projection, its strength was not something that a false saint could contend with. It's the legendary East Flow Sword Saint of the Heavenly God Sword Sect, Wen Donglu. As Shui Yiqing's words came out, endless uproar surged out like a tide. Wen Donglu was a legendary saint of the heavenly god sword sect. Although they were both sword saints, Ling Qianhen, the solitary cloud sword saint, could only be regarded as a false sword saint. Wen Donglu was a true sword saint. The heaven weeping which is a sinner, bearing an endless blood calamity. My heavenly god sword sect, as one of the three great sects of the South Horizon region, naturally has the obligation to eliminate this calamity before it sprouts. Wen Donglu said indifferently. Although it was just a projection of Wen Donglu, it was extremely powerful. As it stretched out its hand, endless sword qi, attacking the transformed Ji Ru Qian Shui. Shui Yi Guchen, Su Jianshi, and the others' faces paled. Yi Guchen did not care whether Shui was the heaven-weeping witch or someone from the dark world. Shui Qian Qian Shui Qian 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 was Shui Qian 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 Shui Qian 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 of the Qian Qian of Qian 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 Qian. With a loud bang, Shui Yiqing was pushed back, blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Injuring a false saint in one move, and this is only a projection of a saint. How powerful is a true saint? Seeing this scene, many martial artists cried out in alarm. The strength of a saint was far beyond their imagination. Ha! As expected of a saint. This one has learned. There will be plenty of time in the future. Although Shui Yiqing was pushed back and injured, she was still calm. She grabbed with one hand, and the flesh demon fetus was torn apart by an external force, separating a part of it. Of course, compared to the entire flesh demon fetus, it was only a small part that was separated. Then, Shui Yiqing stretched out her hand, and true qi surged out, enveloping Ji Ru Qian Shui's body and grabbing her. Leave with me. Shui Yiqing knew that a saint's projection had arrived. Ji Ru Qian Shui couldn't safely absorb the power of the flesh demon fetus. Fortunately, she had awakened 4 wings, and Shui Yiqing had obtained a part of the flesh demon fetus, which was enough to support Ji Ru Qian Shui's consumption. Ji Ru Qian Shui instinctively struggled, and at the same time, her beautiful blood-red eyes couldn't help but turn to Yi Guchen. Amidst the coldness, there seemed to be tears faintly appearing. Those were the feelings of Shui. Brother! 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 Ji Ru Qian Shui, who had turned into the heaven-weeping witch, opened her red lips and said 3 words intermittently. Although she had completely awakened and transformed, there was still a will of Shui in her heart. Shui! Yi Guchen murmured in his heart. It had been a long time since he first saw the girl lying in the blood-red lake at the bottom of the 18-blood prison. It was impossible to say that he didn't have any feelings. Shui's innocent and bright smile was also deeply engraved in Yi Guchen's heart. When Lotus Village was attacked by the Venerable, Shui didn't hesitate to block in front of him and turned into the heaven-weeping witch. However, in the current situation, it was best for Ji Ru Qian Shui and Shui Yiqing to be together. At least Shui Yiqing wouldn't harm Ji Ru Qian Shui. Yi Guchen couldn't even protect himself now. If Shui continued to stay by his side, she would only be a burden to him. In Ji Ru Qian Shui's blood-red eyes, there was a fierce struggle. That was the resistance of Shui's will. You should rest first. In the current crisis, Shui Yiqing naturally wouldn't let Ji Ru Qian Shui continue to stay here. He directly knocked Ji Ru Qian Shui out, and then his figure flashed and crossed the void. You want to leave just like that? When Donglio's projection stretched out his hand and grasped toward Shui Yiqing. The space around Shui Yiqing shook violently. Vaguely, there seemed to be traces of pitch-black spatial cracks spreading out. A saint's control of the power of space was far beyond that of a false saint. If it weren't for the fact that Wen Donglu was just a projection, the void would have been shattered under this grasp. Cough, Shui Yiqing's body shook, and he was injured again. At the same time, the emotive sword principle and the lifeless sword principle's sword domain spread out at the same time, shaking the void, and his figure broke through the void. Wen Donglu hesitated for a moment, but he didn't pursue because the main reason for his avatar's projection was not to deal with Shui Yiqing and the Heaven Weeping Witch, but for the Devil Egg and the Human Sovereign Sword. After Ji Ru Qian Shui's absorption, the flesh devil fetus and the devil egg seemed to be attracted by something, and they wriggled more violently. He was afraid that the thing in the devil egg would soon appear in the world. Wen Donglu wouldn't leave at this critical moment and miss the opportunity. Elder Xinggu and the other two, seeing that Wen Donglu didn't pursue, they naturally wouldn't pursue. Watching Ji Ru Qian Shui leave with Shui Yiqing, Yi Guqin's eyes revealed a trace of relief. At least Shui Er wouldn't be dragged down by him. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Yi Guqin's mind. If you want to see Ji Ru Qian Shui again, come to the Dark World in the future. This voice came from Shui Yiqing. The Dark World? What kind of place is that? Yi Guqin was also confused about the Dark World. However, if he could survive today, Yi Guqin would naturally go to find Shui Er in the future. After all, he was indebted to Shui Er. Moreover, Yi Guqin felt that there must be secrets and secrets behind Shui Er that no one knew. Of course, the premise of all this was that Yi Guqin could survive. However, with the departure of Shui Yiqing and Ji Ru Qian Shui, Yi Guqin and the others almost instantly fell into a desperate situation. No one could stop the projection of the heavenly god sword sect's saint. Even Ling Qianhen and the others, who were invited by Duan Tianfeng, couldn't do anything. When the Red Cloud House Master and Huangfu Dingtao saw Wen Donglio's projection appear, they immediately stopped and looked on as if they were watching from the sidelines. They could not afford to offend a saint's projection. It's about time to put an end to this. Di Haotian, who had been standing quietly in the void, took a step forward and said lightly. Chapter 806. Previously, Di Haotian had been watching from the sidelines because no experts from the Heavenly God Sword sect had come. The strongest person on Di Haotian's side was only concubine Leng, who was a 7th level venerable. As for the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, the collateral branch of the Dongfang family, and the Heavenly Star Dynasty, they all had false saints. Although Di Haotian had extraordinary talent and was a dragon among men, he had not fully grown up. Obviously, it was impossible for him to participate in the battle of the false saint level. Therefore, Di Haotian had been watching from the sidelines, waiting for an opportunity. At the same time, he secretly notified the experts of the Heavenly God Sword sect. With Di Haotian's identity as the Supreme Prince of the Celestial God Sword sect, he had the right to directly contact the saints. Then, when Donglu immediately condensed his avatar projection and descended. But now, Di Haotian had a saint projection on his side, so he naturally had the confidence to not fear Elder Ancient Star and the others. At that moment, seeing Di Haotian stand out, the expressions of Elder Xinggu and the others turned ugly. Although they had notified the saints in the sect, they had not arrived yet. In addition to killing Yi Guqin, Su Jianzhi's Mortal King's sword was also a coveted target. As an immemorial famed sword, 1/3 of the 3 Emperor's sacred swords, the attractiveness of the human sovereign sword was beyond doubt. This person's sovereign sword is something that our heavenly god sword sect's Emperor Hao Tian needs. I hope that everyone will not interfere. Above the sky, when Donglio's projection, wrapped in endless divine light, said. It seemed like a discussion, but it was actually a decision. Di Haotian had an extraordinary position in the Heavenly God Sword sect. Otherwise, the Heavenly God Sword sect would not have allied with other forces to wage war against the Su family for Di Haotian alone. As for Di Haotian, he was born with the Heavenly Emperor sword. He was also the most likely candidate to gather all 3 sacred swords and form the Tri-Emperor sacred sword. At that time, the Heavenly God Sword sect would possess 2 famed primordial swords, and their strength would soar once again. Therefore, Di Haotian had to get the human sovereign sword. Elder Xinggu and the others had ugly expressions when they heard Wen Donglio's words. However, their strength was not enough to make Wen Donglu treat them as equals. Even if it was just a projection, they could not compete with him. Everyone fell silent when they saw Di Haotian step forward. Everyone stared at the young man who looked like a god. Although Di Haotian couldn't compare to those venerables and false saints for the time being, Di Haotian still couldn't compare to them. However, no one doubted that if Di Haotian continued to grow, his future achievements would definitely not be inferior to the ancient Star Elder and the other false saint experts present. Su Jianshi and Yi Guqin stood side by side. When Su Jianshi used the Mortal Emperor's sword earlier, she had overdrawn her body and hadn't fully recovered. If she were to use the Mortal Emperor's sword again, the price she would pay would be irreparable. Yi Guqin, on the other hand, was severely injured after a series of battles. Even if his physical body was unparalleled, coupled with the nourishment of the ancient god's blood, it was impossible for him to recover much. Especially when he forcibly used the Eye of the Void Vault, his sea of consciousness was almost dried up. In his current state, it was already impossible for him to use this move again. Even at this juncture, Yi Guqin struggled to take a step forward and stood in front of Su Jianshi. He couldn't take a step back or let Su Jianshi face Di Haotian alone. Feudal resistance, what's the point? Di Haotian looked down at Yi Guqin and Su Jianshi like a god looking down on mortals. In his eyes, this feudal resistance was laughable. If you want to fight, then let's fight. Yi Guqin didn't want to waste words and spoke coldly. Silly boy, Su Jianshi wanted to say something, but Yi Guqin grabbed her hand. Don't say anything. Stand behind me. Yi Guqin interrupted Su Jianshi. Su Jianshi bit her lip until blood seeped out. She couldn't help but hold Yi Guqin's hand. Indeed, at this point, any words were superfluous. She and Yi Guqin were willing to sacrifice their lives for each other. Even if they died, they would do it together. At this moment, Su Jianshi's eyes shone with unprecedented light as she looked at Yi Guqin's blood-stained face with boundless affection. Everyone who saw this scene sighed inwardly. But now, no one could save this pair. Even Mo Tianfeng couldn't let Ling Qianhen take action. The deterrence of a saint was too great. Even a projection wasn't something a false saint could contend against. How foolish is love! Di Haotian's silver eyes were filled with indifference when he saw this. Di Haotian didn't have any human emotions. He was as cold as the heavens. His only obsession was to obtain the Tri-Emperor's sacred sword and become stronger. Di Haotian, you really don't understand human emotions because you're not human. If you were, why would you do such a cruel thing? Su Jianshi's eyes were bloodshot as she glared at Di Haotian with boundless hatred. If it wasn't for Di Haotian, the Su clan wouldn't have perished. If it wasn't for Di Haotian, her father's body wouldn't have been destroyed. Only a weak primordial spirit was left sleeping in the soul-accumulating coffin. If it wasn't for Di Haotian, Lotus Village's Dragon Abyss Village chief, Uncle Gue Fu, and the other villagers wouldn't have died so tragically. The source of the Su clan's tragedy was Di Haotian. Di Haotian remained indifferent in the face of Su Jianshi's cries. However, he suddenly said, since that's the case, I've thought of a game. You're Yi Guqin, right? If you can take 3 moves from me, I'll give up on Su Jianshi. Di Haotian said indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's eyes fell on Yi Guqin. Take 3 moves from Di Haotian. Not to mention Yi Guqin, who was only at life and death chamber, even Gu Shaoyang, who was also one of the top 10 young masters, wouldn't be able to take 3 moves from Di Haotian easily. Moreover, Yi Guqin was currently heavily injured. Not to mention 3 moves, he wouldn't even be able to take 1 move from Di Haotian. This is equivalent to toying with Yi Guqin. Some cultivators shook their heads. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Di Haotian was playing a game. He wanted to break through Su Jianshi's mental defenses. At that time, it would be easier to refine the human emperor sword from her. Come. Yi Guqin glanced at Di Haotian and took a step forward. It wasn't that Yi Guqin believed Di Haotian's words. He wasn't that naive. It was just that he didn't want Su Jianshi to face Di Haotian. If possible, Yi Guqin would do his best to injure Di Haotian and give Su Jianshi a chance to live. Don't, foolish kid. Su Jianshi's expression changed. If you believe me, then leave it to me. Yiguchen's gaze was firm as he pushed Su Jianche's hand away. Heh! How foolish, not far away, Gu Xiaoyang shook his head and sneered. Yiguchen had made him lose face. He was naturally happy to see Yiguchen fall. On the other hand, Yi Cangyue looked at Yiguchen indifferently. Although Yiguchen's cultivation was not worth mentioning in her eyes, his indomitable spirit and unyielding spirit touched Yi Cangyue slightly. Heh! Seeing Yiguchen step forward, Di Haotian faintly smiled. He slowly raised his hand and a heaven-shaking dragon roar echoed. At the same time, a terrifying aura emitted from Di Haotian's body. His cultivation had reached the 7th level of the Divine Palace. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.